Many works of art aren't fully appreciated until well after their time, and I mean well after their time. We see it again and again, and when they finally are appreciated as the groundbreaking pieces they actually are, we feel regret despite having previously ignored them. On a completely different note, whenever TXT start gearing up to have a comeback, I get really depressed. Is it because they're being overworked? Well, I am depressed about that, but no. Is it that I think the album is going to flop? No. Do I think I'll hate the album? Also no. Am I depressed that they will probably have yet another world tour without coming to Australia? Yes, but that's not it. I get depressed whenever TXT have a comeback because it always reminds me of their past. And more importantly, it reminds me of how insanely and criminally underrated and underappreciated their Dream Chapter trilogy is. I legitimately and unironically believe that TXT's Dream Chapter series may well be one of the best album series ever released in K-pop, one of the best pieces of art produced in K-pop, one of the best works in pop music, and even potentially one of the best works of art in all of music history. But then again, I am literally biased, right? Hence begins a new series, segment, whatever you want to call it, in my podcast. Best K-pop albums and best debuts, where I hope to explore some of the best K-pop albums and best K-pop debuts to ever have been released. But what is the best? Well, I'll discuss that more in the next segment. For this specific video, I'll start us off with the first album of the trilogy, Star, because you know that if I made a video on all three albums at once, I'd never be able to get it out at any reasonable time, and it would be like well over 8 hours anyway. So, to celebrate TXT's 6th anniversary, or however many months after their 6th anniversary that this ends up being released, let's go all the way back and look at their debut and how it introduced us to their story and concept. I'll discuss what this series is and some future videos in it to look forward to, as well as the criteria that makes the Dream Chapter Star part of this series. Then I'll run you through a brief history of TXT and of this album, and we'll discuss metrics of success for the album. Then I'll take a look at each of the songs on the album and we'll break them down, considering their lyrics, music videos, choreographies, and more. At the end, I'll discuss some other details about the album, the performances they did, the things the members said themselves about the story, the overarching storyline of the album as told through song order, and I will consider the question of whether it's even ethical or okay for TXT to discuss such heavy topics as a manufactured K-pop group run by a huge corporation. After all of that, I'll look at the fandom reactions to the album and fan theories, so you have a consolidated idea of the various contemporary interpretations of the album. And damn, this is the first time I've had so much to say that I've had to split my content section into 4 slides. 4! Please do pause if you need, or alternatively you can peruse the list of contents in the description, which also has timestamps if you want to skip anything, and I wouldn't blame you with a video this dense and this long. In future videos, I'll look at the other 2 parts of the trilogy, Magic and Eternity, and in the end I'll have an overarching look at the albums, cementing my belief that the Dream Chapter is indeed one of the best albums/album series. I'll also consider it against other TXT albums and album series, including their most popular title tracks, and will explain how the series is underappreciated even within TXT's fandom moa. A trigger warning is definitely needed for this episode. TXT's storyline includes dark elements, to say the least. Consider this your warning for topics like death, suicidal ideation, self-harm, depression, toxic relationships and codependency, grievous bodily harm, insanity, etc. Feel free to skip to the parts that suit you, use specific warnings and timestamps in the description, or even skip this video altogether if you need to. These topics will be relatively consistently mentioned throughout the video, but to avoid the worst of it, I'd recommend you skip my discussions of Crown and Nap of a Star, and also section 3.7.2. So with that in mind, let's dive into the album which was the foundation of TXT's career, their mostly forgotten origins, and discover why this one, and the Dream Chapter series in general, are not only some of my favourite albums of all time, but have also cemented themselves as my favourite TXT albums. Probably never to be overthrown. So, this video is the start of two series, Best Albums and Best Debuts. But what is the best? Well, in this video I'll be demonstrating to you how, through the album design, song choice, lyricism, choreography, music videos, promotion, and more, the Dream Chapter creates a compelling story with deeply layered themes, which is cohesive, unique, and whole, which has great variety and choice in music, and which set the group and their later work up for massive success. And of course, the albums have no skips, which in K-pop terms means they may as well be perfect anyway. The best albums in this series will include albums that I think fit the above-mentioned criteria, creating a cohesive concept or story through choreography, lyricism, music videos, promotion, styling, etc. Ideally, these albums will also dive into deep and unique themes and stories, and will combine or synthesize a lot of different media references, doing something that I think K-pop is brilliant at, using visual, audio, and other shortcuts to add layers to a story. Some albums I'd like to discuss in this Best Albums series includes the majority of TXT and AT's albums, Idol's I Never Die and I Love, IVE's Ive, BTS's Map of the Soul 7 and Wings, 17's Face the Sun, and more. As far as best debuts, these are the albums which set a group and their concept up for a brilliant career, which created an impact and were cohesive, but which may not have had the concept and story depth and uniqueness required of the best albums. That said, most of these best debuts will probably fit into the best albums as well. Some debuts I'd like to discuss include X1, AT's ENHYPEN and Team, is it Cosmosi, Zero Base One, and IVE. So why start with the Dream Chapter in particular? Well, I think the Dream Chapter as a whole, and in this video specifically Star, is a perfect example of what I would call both the best albums and the best debuts. The Dream Chapter Star is, first of all, the album which got me into K-pop, specifically this shot of Subin in the music video, and after that, the playful and unique animation, the interesting cinematography, the brilliant choreography, and the fun sound of the song. Fun sound, not fun lyrics, guys. The album is creative and artistic and takes a lot of inspiration from other media. It has a strong storyline and artistic vision, creates a unique story with a legitimate message and strong themes, was planned years in advance, seen by their debut date, which I'll discuss later, and tied together the storylines from other groups, namely having references and connections to G-Friend and BTS's storylines. RIP G-Friend. The album was also unique and expressed TXT's uniqueness in the industry. I'll give some examples. First, TXT came out of the gate fully formed and planned, which I think is something many groups, especially when TXT debuted, were missing. This planning is seen, if nothing else, in their debut date, as I mentioned earlier. Second, they debuted without positions, outside of Subin being the leader and Kai being their maknae. Having no positions is now a common thing for groups to do. Off the top of my head, IVE, LE SSERAFIM, Kepler, Just Be, ISNA, Zero Base One, Omega X, and other groups don't have official positions outside of leader and maknae, and sometimes they don't even have a leader. But at the time TXT were unique, one of the first groups, if not the first group to do this, enough to cause a stir. There's a bunch of other details here, but I'm pretty sure that by the end of this video you'll be relatively convinced too. Because in the end, the Dream Chapter has literally everything. Storyline, depth, a moral message, performance skill, catchy music, artistic vision, skill, and more. Everything except perhaps virality, but that has become far more integral to K-pop since these albums, hence they weren't designed for TikTok virality. The Dream Chapter as a whole, and especially Star, are also in my opinion criminally underappreciated and underrated. Obviously, they were well liked and well received albums, but they haven't really held the important place in K-pop fans' minds that I think they should. Let's take this post as an example, which asked the denizens of the TXT Reddit to rank TXT's title tracks in September 2023. Here are some rough stats from this post in terms of the Dream Chapter. Out of 28 responses, Crown was only first once. It did have a few second places, but was often in the last 3. Runaway had 4 first places and a few second places, but was mostly between 3rd and 7th in the ranking. This makes sense since Runaway is generally the most appreciated of the Dream Chapter title tracks. Can't You See Me only had 1 first place and was often at 7th place out of 8 songs. All 3 of these songs got decent praise, although some people said they were forgettable. Overall, most people said it was a testament to TXT's discography that these songs were ranked so low. Runaway was hailed as the most iconic, but I still never see people talking about it these days, so it's still unfortunately forgotten. In comparison to the Dream Chapter, Lose a Lover had 4 first places and many second places, and Sugar Rush Ride had 4 first and was commonly second to 4th. The song which most outshone the Dream Chapter was Love Song, which was first 11 times and was almost always in the top 3. Needless to say, as TXT have moved on and their success has grown, the Dream Chapter has been forgotten, seemingly even by them, as I don't really think I've seen them perform the songs from the Dream Chapter for years now, and some aspects of its storyline seem to have been borderline abandoned. Starting with Love Song, I'd say TXT's storyline developed the K-pop equivalent of DID. There are several versions of the storyline which may or may not have been retconned, or maybe they all exist at once, kind of like alternate universes. But unlike with ATs, where alternate universes were explicitly mentioned from the start, TXT didn't have anything like this until like 2022 or 2023, and they never had the storyline foundation for this. It's confusing and annoying, and most of all, I'm sad, because they have so many unique themes and story elements, and once upon a time I was convinced they'd take over the industry. But then, I don't know what happened. I heard that they had a management change around the time of Chasing That Feeling, and if that's true, I can definitely see it. I don't think HYBE really know what to do with them at this point, other than milking them for money, which is sad, because they used to have one of the most intricately planned concepts in the industry, and now it feels like they're chasing trends instead. They've been selling more albums than ever now, but the more statistically famous they become, the more I feel like they've faded from the public eye and are never discussed. TXT, Stray Kids and ATEEZ were like the 3 4th-gen boy groups, and I hear about Stray Kids and ATEEZ all the time, but TXT? Never. Maybe they're just super popular in Korea but not internationally, or maybe it's because both Stray Kids and ATEEZ have been trending more sexy and TXT haven't. Or maybe it's because, outside of some people disliking Gum, TXT are as scandal-free as ever, but I feel like I never hear anyone discussing them. And you know what the worst thing is? In an odd circumstance, which is the case for me with both ATEEZ and TXT, I pretty much forget the group exists between comebacks, and tend to feel pretty disappointed with said comebacks in general, at least in the past few years. But as soon as I look further into a comeback or listen to some of their older music or read some lyrics, I realise how strong their concepts, at least sometimes, still are. They're less visually cohesive and, in my opinion, far less well planned than they used to be, but they're still there, and they influence the group occasionally to a surprising degree. Basically, TXT's concept has become so obscure and convoluted that even their own fans sometimes think it's disappeared into thin air. This person who commented on my Reddit post about the subject described it well. The feeling that the storyline is disappearing, and then the realization that actually it didn't, and we should all have more faith. Which is a feeling they seem to like, but which I definitely don't. Not to mention, I'm not even convinced that it has come back. With every comeback, I get more and more convinced that this brilliant conceptual concept is just gone. And I'm a huge fan of conceptual K-pop. Well, concepts and storylines, but this problem that plagues TXT is one which has plagued many a group with a complex storyline, like ATEEZ and BTS. Their storyline is too complex at the beginning, hence fans struggle to understand it. So they make it easier to understand, and then people complain, and or it's removed from their actual music videos and implanted into other things, and or they just don't really care about it, and then it kind of disappears, and instead of being their whole identity, it just becomes a cool reference brought out in award show performances and concerts, or a lyrical motif. And once that consistency is gone for me, the whole thing falls apart, which I'll speak about more later. But as I've said, I always get more excited about TXT's storyline and related contents when I look back at it and dive into what they've done in the past. So here we are. The beginning of the group that is the definition of happy on the outside, depressing on the inside. Or, as K-pop fans say, duality. Sorry if that was a bit confusing. Anyway, I have similar thoughts about both ATEEZ and TXT, and to a lesser extent BTS. You've already seen my hatred of inconsistent concepts with Kepler, and I can tell you it will be a theme on this channel. Although honestly, I don't think that ATEEZ, TXT, BTS, or any other group I can think of right now have storylines or concepts so bad I feel the need to rewrite them the way I did with Kepler. Maybe one day we'll do ISNA or Zero Base One for the fun of it. So with that said, let's move on to a history of TXT and the Dream Chapter. A new big hit group was first mentioned in 2017 by Big Hit founder Hitman Bang, but rumours and speculation were renewed in November 2018, when the group were reported to have 5 members around the average age of 17, and to be the first big hit boy group since BTS in 2013. The 5 members were announced through introduction films on Big Hit's channel in January 2019, Yeonjun on the 11th, Subin on the 13th, Kai on the 15th, Taehyun on the 17th, and Beomgyu on the 20th. These introduction films well and truly showed how different this group would be from BTS at debut, with a fun and playful teenage theme, and one well and truly centered in the ordinary life of teenagers. School, public transport, video games, music, and the magic of everyday life, which teens and kids may see but adults have to put behind them. Ironically enough, TXT being idols would have had to put their childhoods behind them at this point. But, well, a concept's a concept, right? Each of these videos had Morse code at the end, which spelt dreaming. This was our first introduction to TXT's affinity for Morse code, a motif so unique and interesting that I was compelled to make a Tumblr post ranting about how amazing it was a few years ago. As I said in that post, TXT's use of Morse code is truly brilliant. It's a unique visual and sonic motif which no other group has used as far as I'm aware. It's relatively easy to decipher but still sounds mysterious and magical, which combined with their dreaming Morse code tells us a lot about them and their storyline. After this, TXT released a group introduction film on the 24th of January, which showcased their playful dynamic as a group, and released questioning films for each member, which had a more ethereal flower concept. The Morse code at the end of the questioning films was tomorrow. I don't know where I got that information, but I actually don't think it's correct. I think it was different for each member, but you will find out more about that in the future. Teasers were released for their debut throughout January and February, as is usual for K-pop groups. TXT's primary fanbase at this time were of course ARMY, since they were of course BTS's much anticipated brother group. This led to lots of memes, especially about the differences in concept between TXT's debut and BTS's. It also led to a lot of BTS mentioning TXT, and the two groups do indeed seem to be friends to this day, which is nice. On a more negative note, the naming issue. Fans obviously wanted to call Huening Kai Kai, since, well, his first name is Kai, and his surname is Huening, but EXO fans weren't very happy, so fans migrated to calling him Ning Ning, a name originating from his surname which has apparently been his nickname for a long time. But fans of SM groups found out that a new SM group had a trainee with the stage name Ning Ning, so they weren't happy about that. This later turned out to be Ning Ning from aespa. And thus, I guess we were stuck with Hyuka and Huening Kai? This was the first of TXT's name dramas, names seeming to be pretty much the only thing TXT get in controversies about, which is funny since they, especially at debut, had an emphasis on names. Long names, calling names, magic names, the name chapter, dual names, call us by the right name, not the abbreviated name, you name it, pun intended. There was some name detail. Anyway, TXT's debut album was called The Dream Chapter Star, which explained the dreaming Morse code, and a lot of people were already on top of their concept from the start, saying that they felt the concept would be cute but with a dark twist. Little did they know. Anyway, TXT debuted with Crown on March 4th, 2019, at which point people did indeed realise how much their concept would be a combination of light and dark. I like this comment at the top of their music video, which describes exactly this phenomenon. Anyway, let's talk about success metrics for the Dream Chapter. Pardon me while I vomit Wikipedia metrics, articles, and sales summaries at you for a few minutes. And also, don't forget that K-pop numbers are 1. Inflated by the nature of K-pop companies and fandoms, and 2. In this case, inflated massively by ARMYs supporting TXT's debut so much. Although the ARMY support for TXT quickly dropped off after debut, and when they debuted, K-pop, believe it or not, was significantly less money hungry than it is these days. The debut music video Crown hit 14.5 million views on YouTube in 24 hours, which at the time broke the record for the most viewed boy group debut. It was also apparently the most liked K-pop debut in 24 hours with 2.3 million likes, which, okay, I guess that's good. The album debuted at number 1 on the Gaon album chart and the Billboard World Album chart, and Crown was number 1 on the Billboard World Digital Songs chart. At this point, I feel like there's so many charts you could just release a song and get a high chart position even without it being super successful. Anyway, Crown and the Dream Chapter Star had a lot of other accolades, and had high positions on many other charts and such, like the Billboard 200 and Emerging Artists charts. At the end of the promotion period, Star reached a top chart position of 1 in Korea, 1 on the Billboard World Albums chart, and 3 in Japan, with an odd discrepancy in sales. Some sites say around 430,000 and some sites say 460,000. Either way, they sold over 400,000 albums at debut, which may not sound like a huge number, but let me tell you a few things. First, album sales in general were lower in 2019, partially because there were generally fewer versions of albums and fewer predatory methods to pressure fans into buying more albums, and partially because K-pop was arguably less popular and less obsessed with numbers in 2019. K-pop experienced a huge boom in 2020 with more fans joining and more groups debuting during the pandemic, and the following massive streaming and album success of BTS meant that fans started seeing numbers more as a measure of success as opposed to social and cultural power as a measure of success. The other thing to remember is that this number seems low compared to modern day standards, partially because of the fact that TXT have experienced a huge increase in sales over their careers. This seems to have hit a peak with the name chapter Temptation, which sold 3.3 million copies in Korea. But make no mistake, 400,000 albums is a lot, and is more than most groups will sell in their entire careers. TXT earned their first music show win at the show on the 12th of March, 8 days after their debut, which I believe made them the fastest first win for a boy group at the time. They then earned 2 more wins with Crown, 1 at M Countdown and 1 on Show Champion. Hilariously, TXT have had, I believe, several wins where they've had to be pretty much kicked off stage by the staff for thanking the fans for too long, and I believe this was one of those situations. Or maybe I'm confusing them with someone else. See, this is just one of the reasons that, although I do my best to verify my information, you shouldn't 100% trust some random video on the internet. TXT released a lyric video for Blue Orangaeade on the 7th of April, which currently has 10 million views, and a music video for Cat&Dog on the 25th of April, currently at 112 million views. There was also an English version for this music video. At this point, TXT announced their fandom name on April 25th. Remember when groups used to announce fandom names after debut? They announced their fandom name on April 25th as Young One. However, this received backlash as it was the name of Tiffany Young's fans. Hence, Big Hit revised it and announced the new fandom name MOA on August 22nd. Before the advent of MOA, TXT released the music video for Nap of a Star on June 5th, 2019, which is one of their most iconic music videos and I think has defined their identity, but somehow only has 10 million views on YouTube? Like, how did this happen? This is an atrocity. The final, quote, music video TXT released for this era, completing their full album, was a special video for Our Summer, which at time of writing has 14 million views. How did this surpass Nap of a Star? This started a trend with the Dream Chapter, videos for almost every, or in this case, every, song. TXT promoted their debut both in Korea and America with American fan signs which were kind of in tandem with BTS, since BTS were also promoting and I believe touring in America at the time. This meant that they spent a lot of time dealing with American reporters, and also that Yeonjun spent an excessive amount of time explaining the meaning of their name and also emphasizing that no, they didn't want to be called TXT, they wanted to be called Tomorrow by Together, in full, every single time. As you can tell, that desire didn't stick, and they are now well and truly TXT. Overall, it was a very successful debut and everyone liked them and found their concept interesting and fascinating. An important note, since BTS were at the time known for a mega confusing and deep storyline. Hence, people, read ARMYs, wanted to find the detail in TXT's storyline and potentially connect it to BTS's. Hence the beginning of the TU. Anyway, at time of writing this script, the Crown music video is sitting at 169 million views and 179 million plays on Spotify. The entire Crown album has a combined roughly 442 million streams on Spotify. Their following album, The Dream Chapter Magic, was pushed back several times due to member illness, and they began to lose fans as ARMYs were no longer interested in the group and they entered a hiatus. But that's all history for a different video. We're only raving about Star today. In this segment of the video, by far the bulk of the video, I'll discuss, well, what else? The actual album, The Dream Chapter Star. Starting with some general aspects of the album and other fun details from this era, and then I'll discuss each of the songs in order. Feel free to skip to whichever parts interest you the most. But also, this is the big trigger warning section for this video. Ahem. Crown and Nap of a Star. Starting with the general things I like about this album. Okay, so first of all, their debut date. TXT debuted on the 4th of March 2019, aka 9 3/4 Day. This is very special, considering their general storyline associations with Harry Potter and magical schools in general, and especially considering their first comeback, Runaway, had explicit references to Harry Potter. I mean, that's literally in the Korean title of the song. As much as I hate J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter has had a large impact on society which will likely endure for a long time, and I think it's super magical, pun intended, that a group whose concept has so many connections to Harry Potter debuted on 9 3/4 Day. Speaking of, this also shows how perfectly and brilliantly planned in advance TXT, their concept and their storyline were. If you can plan far enough in advance that you can pick such a meaningful debut date, well, that's a good sign for what's to come, right? If I was going to debut in a group, other than good treatment, the one thing I think I'd wish for most is a well-planned and epic concept. Next, Morse code. TXT have used Morse code across several of their comebacks and other activities, and it all originated in the Dream Chapter. I've talked about TXT's use of Morse code and how great it is before on my blogs, and I've been a TXT Morse code fan for a long time, but I'll summarise it here. TXT's use of Morse code is unique in that no other group in K-pop has had a Morse code motif or even really used it at all, I think. It goes with the idea of multiple languages, which many groups use, but unlike using just English, it uses an extra layer of code, which adds an air of mystery and discovery, as well as being playful and engaging the audience in the storyline. TXT are essentially Harry Potterified magical boys. So the use of Morse code in this context, remembering that Morse code has nautical associations and being in the Navy is associated with men and boys, becomes boyish. Morse code is also commonly associated with SOS, which makes sense since Crown is kind of like a cry for help. And of course, having any sort of motif as a group is always something that will bring in more fans and more appreciation from current fans. So on one hand, yes, I am looking a bit too far into this in the same way you are forced to look too far into your texts in English and to find things the author never intended. But on the other hand, TXT's storyline is, at least at debut, genuinely well considered, and their use of Morse code and other motifs has tons of layers which are very, very interesting. Speaking of good planning, TXT established from debut that they would have a light versus dark concept. I don't necessarily mean that in terms of good fighting evil, although that has been a theme. No, I mean in terms of being light, bright, and happy on the outside and dark and depressed on the inside. This is something that their title track, Crown, perfectly exemplified. The song, choreography, and music video are cute and boyish, but the lyrics are seriously dark and deal with themes that are deep, universal, and especially important for youth. The group TXT claims to represent and tie themselves to. TXT's storyline, if nothing else, deals with the experience of being young and growing up, and Crown is one of the songs which best shows this theme. This lyrical disconnect effect isn't super effective in Korean, since Korean fans and Korean-speaking fans are instantly able to see both the light and dark side of the song, but for international non-Korean speaking fans, this can be a huge shock. Here's a cute and fun song I like, so I want to know more about it. Let me look up the lyrics. Oh wait, those lyrics are depressing as hell. So at this point you might think that to best express the divide between the superficially light and thematically dark in their storyline, Star should have had 2 album versions, one dark and one light, but it only has one album version, the light one. Why? Well, I don't pretend to fully understand hype, or at this point Big Hit, but I'll propose 2 reasons. First, although K-pop has always been money hungry, it was far less so in 2019 than now. Now, it's somewhat accepted when 17 have like over 1,000 photo cards, and it's definitely accepted whenever TXT have 3 versions of an album plus a version for each of the 5 members. But back in 2019, merch was less common and less varied in general. Season's greetings, themed plushies, more than 2 album versions, and things like that weren't very common, especially for debut albums which rarely had multiple versions. The second reason is more speculation, because oddly enough, although you may expect 2 versions to better express the themes of the album, I think only one version is best, because Crown is, if not explicitly, implicitly about hiding your sad emotions behind a happy face, and this album design is the definition of this. It's nice and simple and boyish and shows the happy attitude the group use as a mask for their darker emotions and themes. A simple design with a deeper meaning. I like that. Ahem, Morse code. The styling of their performances during this album also reinforced this idea. Now let me quickly mention TXT's other performances. Although they really didn't do any major performances before award show season, at which point Magic had actually come out, TXT did and almost always have had hints at their next comeback months in advance, which shows more planning. To be fair, this is something that lots of other groups do. LE SSERAFIM have, ATEEZ do it consistently, Zero Base One have, and so on. But although other groups do it, it's still something I love about TXT, so I wanted to mention it here. We'll talk about it more when we talk about Magic, because that's when they were in the thick of it. Next, names. TXT were big on names. I mean, they still are, but not nearly as much as they used to be. Everything was about names with debut TXT. This was in 2 ways. First, dual names with, as you'd expect, dual meaning, and second, long names. This is exemplified in Crown. Crown has two names, the English version Crown and the Korean version which translates to One Day a Horn Grew From My Head. Alright, long name. And the two names reflect the dual nature of the song. Dark on the inside, One Day a Horn Grew From My Head is the start of the depressing story the song tells, but at the same time, Crown shows the bright and happy mask that's put over the top, and the song itself describes how, through the process of meeting others and learning to appreciate himself more, the boy in the song, Yeonjun, is able to think of his horns not as a horrific curse, but as a crown. Isn't that lovely? Look, Crown is definitely in my top 5 or even top 3 favourite TXT songs, and is probably my favourite title track of theirs, so prepare yourselves. Anyway, names. We have a few names associated with this era. First, the group name, Tomorrow by Together, which expresses their purpose of coming together and heading into a new tomorrow. This is whimsical and evokes the idea of dreams and of growing up and working together, which is what the group is all about, and which is a name that has continued to influence their direction throughout their careers. TXT may well be the K-pop group which best embodied their name in their concept. Second, the questioning films. The name Questioning is all about curiosity and exploration, both of which are themes in their storyline, and which are associated with youth, which the group embody and represent. Third, their fandom names. Young Ones, the original fandom name, had clear meaning. The group is about the experiences of being young, and the fans are the ones who follow them. Their second fandom name, Moa, follows the lengthy double name thing. Moments of Alwaysness. This reflects TXT's name and concept, togetherness and the future/time, while also, being a long fandom name. Also, fun mention here of Kai's stage name struggles, which may or may not have been referenced later in their careers. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't think TXT have really had any scandals, but the only scandal-adjacent things they've gone through involve names. Kai's name and their fandom name. TXT are so dedicated to their name concept they even got in name scandals, I guess. Next, the name of the album, The Dream Chapter Star. Well, we already know that TXT are heavily associated with dreams, and a pet theory a lot of people had around their debut was that their concept would be all about dreams versus reality, or about being caught in a dream, and they weren't super far off. Dreams can be negative in this way, being trapped in a dreamscape, but they can also be positive and youthful, the dreams for who you want to be and what you want to do. Star refers to the star from Nap of a Star, a symbol which represents safety and dreams, and which only shines when the 5 boys are together. The star has returned in later content with the same symbolism. Next, the songs on the album. Blue Orangaeade shows something that seems paradoxical and unusual. Orangaeade, not lemonade, and it's blue at that. This reflects the song's theme of opposites attract. Next, Crown, which I've already talked about. Our Summer reflects how the group are in the summer of their lifetimes, their youth, and the presumed dream state for the world. Everyone likes summer until they've experienced a 50-degree Australian summer with no aircon. Cat&Dog, similarly to Blue Orangaeade, reflects the opposites attract idea, and the concept of duality, as well as reinforcing animal imagery which was introduced in Crown. Finally, Nap of a Star. Well, it's about the nap of the star, the nap being when the 5 boys separate and the star no longer glows. So yeah, names are important, and they will continue to be important as we journey through TXT's career. Next, the logo animation. TXT have a new logo and a new animation for each album they release, which, although it's a more common thing for groups to do now, was very unusual when they debuted. And as I analysed in this old Tumblr post, these logo animations aren't just fun little things to watch. They communicate the story and concept of the album, and by stringing them together we can follow TXT's storyline over time with surprising accuracy and depth of understanding. The logo animation for Star is, as expected from a fresh and simple album, simple. It simply involves a white and a yellow arrow coming together and connecting. Tomorrow by together? There are purple pixels which come out of this and which glitch over them, evoking a video game which is boyish and youthful, and which relates to later comebacks. Additionally, purple is most commonly associated with eternity, so was this a teaser for that album, or was it just the colour they chose to be the opposite of yellow, as in Blue Orangeade? I guess it can be both. Finally, before we go into the actual analysis, I wanted to talk about some general themes we'll see throughout the album. These are the kinds of things you'll see me repeating a lot throughout the rest of the video, so prepare yourselves. I've already talked about light versus dark, themes of youth, names, and hiding something dark with a bright mask. I've also talked about Morse code, dreams, and magic, but TXT's storyline, or at least as it is in Crown, also includes the ideas of time and the passage of time, mental health, illusions, corruption, angels and demons, friendship and love, soulmates, togetherness, nature, duality and opposites, secrets and mysteries, fate, and lots of animal imagery and references. So now that you're on the lookout for those things, let's go into the actual album, starting with the first song, Blue Orangeade. For these analyses sections, I may use some of my content from my blogs, so if you're the half a person who followed me from my blogs to my YouTube channel and didn't come here from Reddit or one of my super long videos, you may recognise some of this content, but I have reviewed it in light of the fact it's been several years since I originally analysed these. To be honest, nothing really changed. Blue Orangeade is the first song on the album, so we need to consider it in the context of being the opening song too. It's kind of crazy to think that if we were still in the age of records, this could well have been the first TXT song a person would hear. Blue Orangeade has a lyric video, a choreography, and of course, lyrics. Duh. Let's start with the lyrics, since they form the foundation of the lyric video and choreography. When I first did these lyric analyses, I had been doing a lot of ATEEZ analysis too, and I wanted to colour code things. Now, colour coding ATEEZ's songs is relatively easy since I could just colour code Treasure Tease as one colour, Hulla Tease as another, and Joint Topics as a third. This was before more ATEEZ versions were introduced. However, it's far harder to colour code TXT's lyrics since they don't have this clear divide. I decided I wanted to use purple for general themes in a story, blue for more specific ones, and red for specifically gothic or death-related themes. This kind of worked, but it has its gaps. So basically the colours kind of mean something, but you can also choose to ignore them. You remember how I talked about TXT's storyline having DID? Well, hilariously enough, this, the very first song they ever released, is an example of this. Blue Orangeade. What is it about? It's about opposites attract, but TXT's storyline, at least as it is presented in music videos, only brings in romance far later. The dream chapter is all about friendship. Or is it? You can read almost all of these songs as either romantic or friendship songs. If we read them as romantic, they go into the same camp as songs like Love Song and Good Boy Gone Bad, which are more explicitly romantic. But if we read them as platonic songs, they go in with Can't You See Me and Nap of a Star. Reading Blue Orangeade in both ways creates the start of both storylines. Friends meeting and being opposites attract, and romantic interests meeting and being opposites attract. Yes, the song does say girl, like once, and like I said, the rest of the album is ostensibly about friendship. I'm also ace, so of course I come into this with a bias of wanting everything to be as unromantic as possible out of fear that romance would lead to sexy concepts. TXT are one of the few groups in K-pop whose concept, at least at debut, was friendship instead of romance, and I want it to stay that way because I believe it's unique. Mind you, TXT's concept, if nothing else, is youth in all of its forms, and both romance and friendship are important to many people in their youth and as they grow up. Mind you, according to TXT, magic powers and curses are also important to youths, so make of that what you will. I know these are symbolic, we'll discuss it later. Shout out to aespa and ATEEZ who also have concepts that aren't romance, but instead superpowered feuds and pirate anarchy. Obviously, there are other groups who do neither romance or friendship, but if they pick one, it's romance every single time. Anyway, Blue Orangeade, it's all about duality and paradoxes. It doesn't necessarily have tons of relevance to the storyline in that it doesn't tell a story in the same way Crown does, but it does contribute to TXT's theming, so let's have a look at the lyrics. For those who didn't see my Tumblr posts, in each of these lyric analyses, I wrote the initials of the member who sings the line next to the line, and I also searched for alternate translations of lines. Neither of these things are necessarily important to the storyline, or at least not as much as I'd like them to be, but they can still be interesting. Blue Orangeade begins with our two parties, whether they be the members or the amalgamation of the members and a romantic interest, meeting, and the narrator realizing, wow, you're the opposite of me. And despite this, they're still drawn together. The first verse brings in the motif of duality, which defines the whole song, and the idea of opposites attract, whether that be as soulmates, through destiny, yin and yang, etc. It doesn't really matter. And of course, alwaysness, aka Moa. The song starts with the line "in this dark world," which shows 1. The power of the special relationship described in the song, and 2. The duality of TXT's songs, bright outside, dark inside. I know I intend to discuss this album mostly as its own thing, as we would have seen it when it came out alone, but I do need to mention here that this idea of a dark world has dominated TXT's storyline and content for years now, and also being literally dependent on another person to a harmful degree, an idea which is explored lightheartedly in this album and significantly less lightheartedly in Minisode 2. The second verse emphasises the complementary colours idea we saw earlier in the song and the need to be together, as well as bringing in even more dualities: morning versus evening, dogs versus cats, south and north magnets, blue and red, and Tupac and Biggie? Is this a reference to the possibility of TXT being a hip-hop group? For our purposes, for those who don't know and who didn't watch BuzzFeed Unsolved religiously when you were younger, Tupac and Biggie were American rappers who were killed in separate incidents in 1997 and were rivals of some description. So it's basically just another way to express duality. Then we get to the chorus, which just has repeated lyrics, and to the bridge. I sure hope I'm using these musical terms correctly since I know nothing about music. Anyway, the bridge? It talks about the listener being the centre of the narrator's life and their heart's glow, which evokes the idea of the star, which is the centre of the boys' lives and which glows when their hearts are together. This line was also translated as "You're the light in my heart," which is perhaps a more obvious star image. We then get the first equation of TXT's storyline, kind of, -1 ++1, which presumably means they're opposites who attract and create a positive product anyway, and of course, being young together. As the winter passes refers us back to the dark world and suffering, while the word blossom and the melting of the cold self reflect how these two groups or people coming together has made both of their lives brighter, and also foreshadows To Me, Freeze and Minisode 2. And then we have the final chorus and the end of the song. If you'd like to take your time reading through the lyrics, I'll link my old Tumblr post in the reference document in the description. Okay, nice and relatively simple, right? Let's talk about the embodiment of the lyrics, the choreography. If you look back at my old videos, you'll see that there's no Blue Orangeade choreography analysis. I was halfway through creating one for Blue Orangeade when I decided to start the podcast, so it kind of got shoved to the side for a few years. But as you can see from this video, and as I have promised a few people previously, I never gave up on doing more analysis, which is exactly why the analysis playlist and these mini playlists, best albums, best debuts, etc. exist, because I like analysing things. Okay, the choreography for Blue Orangeade. Let's start with the general details. Blue Orangeade has a bouncy, energetic and youthful choreography, well in line with the rest of the album and many of TXT's earlier choreographies. Similarly to the lyrics, you can interpret this choreography in many ways, but it best fits the energy that comes with falling in love and of boys awkwardly trying to be cool while exploding with happiness inside. There's a lot of jumping and also lots of hand waving, which is in line with many motifs we see in Crown, for instance rewinding time and waving a magic wand. Also, as we will see in Crown, the choreography is quite repetitive, certainly in the way it uses these elements, and although the choreography itself isn't as storyline heavy as Crown, it does express and reinforce several aspects of their storyline. One thing that I find interesting is that, despite being a brighter song, this choreography does include several sections which could be the members controlling each other, an aspect of the storyline, or they could just be the choreographers trying to make things look cool. I'll point these out anyway, but they could really go in either direction. As a little aside, I feel like Bombgue got a lot of lines in this song, and I think that was a good choice, especially with the opening lines where I can't imagine any of the other members performing those lines as well as he does. There's also a few moments which seem like there might be mistakes in this video, especially with Taehyun, who seems to be early several times, but this makes sense considering how many choreographies and how much content they put out at their debut. That said, watching each of the members in this dance practice has reminded me of just how good of a dance unit TXT are and were. This was at the start of 4th Gen, which was characterised by an increase in dance, skill and polish, and I think the choreographies of the Dream chapter, but especially Crown, really show how TXT were an exemplar of 4th Gen choreographies, and how they provided a different side to 4th Gen boy group choreographies. While ATEEZ and Stray Kids were powerful, and even girl groups like ITZY leaned into power, TXT were all about synchronization, detail, and youthful energy. Despite all that I've just said, I actually don't think that the Blue Orangaeade choreography is super interesting overall. One of the most interesting things I can say about it is that it has the illusion of looking normal when you look at the whole group, but as soon as you watch a single member the whole way through, you can see just how much insane work they're doing, and how insanely tiring this choreography must be. It doesn't seem to have anything particularly hard in it, it just looks like 5 workouts rolled into one. So I guess if I ever decide to lose weight by doing K-pop dances, this is where I'll start. Alright, into the choreography analysis video. The only other thing I have to say here is that Blue Orangaeade also has a lyric video, which is nice and playful. It has some of that funky 2010s editing and incorporates both absurd imagery, classically poorly photoshopped segments, and both comic book and 1990s Windows styling. The video itself includes clips of the members which embody both the playful nature of the song and the actual lyrics. For instance, the contrast between red roses and the blue ocean. There's also lots of basically TXT just representing youth. For instance, doing fun things together, pranking each other, playing around with fun filters, doing sport and hanging out, using VR headsets, and so on, and also being awkward disasters. This is all nice and furthers their youthful concept, but even though I'm sure I could look into it more if I wanted, somehow I don't think Subin and Yeonjun pranking Bomgyu into sitting on a fake chair is related to the storyline. Sorry about that. So with that done, let's move on to our second track, the title track. And my favourite song on the album too. I said Crown is in the top 3 of my favourite TXT songs, or at least in the top 5, and I don't think that will ever really change. It's just that good. For the record, my other favourite is Can't We Just Leave the Monster Alive? Oh wow, another long name. I'll give a shout out to Good Boy Gone Bad and Devil by the Window for having stellar concepts. Alright, Crown. Get out of here eternally. This is true duality of concept. While 3/4 of the rest of the album is bright and energetic in concept, Crown being the title track shifts our perception of all of these songs and of the whole album, and really sets the tone for TXT's storyline and career. The rest of the album is good, sure, but Crown is the song that really propels this to best debuts status. Crown exemplifies TXT's image, theming, and storyline, and I don't think any other song they could have debuted with would have been as good for them. I'm deeply saddened they don't really perform it anymore. So let's do something very fitting for the concept duality of Crown. Muffle my sadness with a happy mask through taking a look at the fake happy song. Crown is the beginning of a trend of TXTs. Epic lyricism which captures surprising psychological depth for a K-pop group, and which, as you'd expect, me being a psychology student, has endeared me to them. Another lyrical standout is Good Boy Gone Bad, which is criminally underappreciated, but I'll also shout out the lyrics of Runaway, Can't You See Me, Puma, and Wishlist. Anyway, let me tell you about Crown. Crown's lyrics are the basis for the Nap of a Star music video, and describe the start of TXT's storyline, the inciting incident, if you will, from Yeonjun's perspective. I mean, to be fair, a good chunk of the storyline is from Yeonjun's perspective anyway, but this was especially the case in Crown and Star. This is the song that established a lot of motifs in TXT's content I talked about earlier, and also various other ones I didn't mention, such as society, eternity, dissociation, spells, and curses, and of course mental health, both good and, more commonly, bad. This song is largely a metaphor for puberty and growing up, but in a far darker sense. Not growing into yourself, but becoming someone you can't recognize in the mirror, and questioning your sense of self. It's very well written from a psychological perspective, and I think it really speaks to the experiences of today's youth. Or at least it speaks to me and my experiences, so good enough, I guess. Either way, speaking to the youth is kind of the whole purpose of TXT, so I'd hope they'd be able to achieve that. As I mentioned previously, the song has 2 names. The English or international version Crown and the Korean version, One Day a Horn Grew on My Head. And if you consider them in the reverse order of how I presented them, they tell the story of the song. The horn is a horrific thing, or at least so Yeonjun feels, but by coming together with the other members, the horn becomes a crown and a source of at least some beauty and pride. Oof, I love Crown so much. The song starts with this exact inciting incident. A horn has grown on Yeonjun's head and he stares in the mirror, not recognizing himself. The lyrics reference feelings of dissociation and hopelessness, the desire to disappear, and feeling out of control and monstrous. Alternate translations from the original Korean make this even more apparent. For instance, the end of the first line can be translated either as "it cannot be me" or "it is not me," both of which express the feelings of self-hatred, denial, shock, and dissociation, but in the case of "it is not me," the particular language is even harsher. Interestingly enough, I'd like you to consider the 5 stages of grief in this song. Here, we've clearly started with denial, but almost immediately transition into depression. Basically, this song goes through 3 stages of grief. There are 2 ways you could read the stages of grief in this song. First, you could argue that the words "it cannot be me" is a sign of bargaining, and that the self-hatred expressed through lines like "I'm a beast" represents anger, but neither of these are defined stages in the same way as denial and depression. Interestingly enough, I think the Nap of a Star music video expresses the anger stage well, or at least self-directed anger, but whether you interpret self-hatred as anger in Crown is a matter of your own interpretation. This first stanza or verse is also the introduction of the curses, which is only introduced for Yeonjun through Crown, but which is expanded upon for each of the other members in the Nap of a Star music video. Each of the members has a defining feature/power/curse, with the exception of Kai and Yeonjun, who each have 2. I'll discuss these more in the music video analysis for Nap of a Star. Anyway, the song continues describing the horns, which can't be suppressed, no matter how much Yeonjun tries, leading to even greater self-hatred, and also the introduction of the other members through the lines "need you to come and save me" and "got no one but ya." These specific lines are the ones that really confuse songs like Blue Orangaeade, because those songs use a direct address to imply a romantic relationship, right? But we know from the Nap of a Star music video that the direct address in Crown is actually from Yeonjun to the other members, and specifically Kai. Hence, a friendship relationship. Hence, confusion in interpretation of other songs, when the title track has literally established the audience as the other members. We can use context clues to figure out songs on a song-by-song basis, but this discrepancy does make TXT's multi-strand storyline more confusing than it needs to be. Either way, can I just say that it is absolutely brilliant that Yeonjun was the one who sung these lines about needing to be saved and feeling like a beast. And even further, these were his first lines in the song. Very snazzy. An alternate translation of Bomgyu's lines at the start of this next segment is "There's a horn coming out of my head, what do? I don't know how to stop it," which nicely expresses the hopelessness and self-hatred that Yeonjun feels at this time. Next, we get to Yeonjun's introduction of the other members. These lines, "Are you my savior who found me wandering?" and "Do your own wings make you feel the same pain as me?" are nicely expressed in the Nap of a Star music video. And the first line has been alternately translated as "Are you my salvation who has found me deserted?", which is even more biblical imagery associated with Kai. This is also when we see the group refer to their curses as pains. Speaking of members singing lines, Yeonjun is the one who introduces the idea of the other members being his savior, and he's also the most important member, both in terms of the story and singing lines. As I noted in my original lyric analysis, although Yeonjun is the most interesting and important member here, it's also interesting that Kai is the one who, in the pre-chorus, introduces the idea of himself, the angel in the desert, and Taehyun, the one with the magic eye who is always investigating things and knows too much, is the first one who refers to the curses as pains, adding extra insight and meaning, and tying them to real-life experiences of youth and pain as opposed to just magic. This pre-chorus also leads into Yeonjun's recovery as he encounters the other members for the first, that's first with an asterisk, time. Alright, let's go into the chorus. A 10 out of 10 chorus, may I say. The chorus is the culmination of Yeonjun's pain, and of him coming together with the other members to start to heal. He can now refer to loving his horns. Interestingly enough, Kai, the savior, is the one who sings these lines for him. The horns become a crown, their hearts beat in sync, and they together have become better people. or as the song says, perfect, and are no longer lonely. This chorus includes a lot of common motifs in the storyline: the pains, angels and demons, positivity and negativity, togetherness, magic, youth, and more. But there are a few lines I want to highlight. First, the fourth line, feeling the beat of both of our hearts pound, is also translated as the sensation of going pitter-pat, which nicely expresses the pounding of hearts but is also somewhat animalistic, and TXT love their animal motifs. The pitter-pat translation is the first translation of the song I heard, and as I noted in my original lyric post, it really is one of the lines that made me fall in love with TXT. Another line that is a pet favourite of mine is "Stop the loneliness abracadabra" and "Stop the suffering abracadabra." These lines are super poignant and introduce magic to the storyline while also having a very nice gothic contrast. TXT are children, or at least teenagers in this storyline. They're naive and yet to experience the full cruelty of the world. They cling to their childhood while their curses bring them closer to the real, dark, adult world. Hence, as we see primarily through Yeonjun, they're excluded and fall into self-hatred, harm, and depression, but they still cling to their childhood. The fact that they, and especially Yeonjun, despite having quite powerful magic, would choose to use such a childish spell, abracadabra, to try and stop their extreme suffering is incredibly sad. I don't think I'm explaining myself very well, so basically this is the TXT storyline equivalent of a kid asking Santa to stop their father from beating up their mother, or to stop the voices in their head that tell them to kill themselves. This is something I'll talk about way more later, and especially with Minisode 2, but whoever writes TXT's lyrics is doing a great job. Their lyrics do a great job touching on the naivety of children and teens and the suffering they experience, while also going into depth on the various conflicting emotions that trauma can inflict. Best of all, it is done, in my opinion, in a very sensitive way. This isn't torture porn, this is, or at least I really hope it is, a genuine artistic expression of the suffering of children and youths, and the pain of discovering the real world and having to grow up too soon. TXT definitely have PTSD, and this is potentially one of the reasons I gravitated towards their storyline. Not only is it artistically and psychologically interesting, but it also creates a great sense of catharsis for anyone who has experienced anything similar to what is described here. I won't get into details, but I'm sure you can imagine. Moving on to... I wouldn't necessarily call this a rap, but considering its placement in the song, it was probably supposed to stand in for a rap verse. This segment, fittingly, is sung by Yeonjun, who questions his exclusion from the world and the darkness versus light of the world. This brings in even more animalistic language. Predator versus prey, fitting considering Yeonjun has stag antlers, light versus dark, hopelessness versus hope, and loneliness versus belonging and togetherness. Interestingly, his second last line, "Even here there could be a light," is also translated as "Would there be a light even for the devils," showing how despite the catharsis of the chorus, the suffering and trauma and self-hatred haven't disappeared. This also brings in more biblical imagery, which we see again in many other songs like Angel and Devil by the Window. The verse also summarizes the story, and through said animal imagery, duality, etc., kind of foreshadows many other TXT songs, most notably Puma, in which the predator becomes the prey. Next, one of my favourite sections of this song, where Subin comes in talking about destiny, names, and being another person's half, aka soulmates. The choreography really completes this segment, but we'll talk about that, in the choreography segment. This is very much about destiny and angels and devils. Then we get our repeated pre-chorus and chorus, and on into the bridge, where yet again the worries bleed back in. The feeling of loneliness and ostracization, but of course, the other members are still here, and they can understand, and they can make the world feel just a little bit better. And by being together they create magic, which, yeah, that's like the whole point of the Star and Magic Island, but I guess it's nice to see it expressed in a more realistic way, maybe? We then get a line, "Ending all of my pain," sung by Bomgyu, which is also apparently translated as "I'm not in pain anymore," which is the point of the song to some extent. And of course, very fittingly for this song, we end up on the stop the loneliness abracadabra, stop the suffering abracadabra lines. Even though the pain has been mended while they're together, it will always be there. That's the nature of trauma. It doesn't just go away, and it takes a lot longer to fade than just one song. So that's the end of the song. A very nice song which perfectly introduces TXT's storyline and also their wondrous lyricism, which sensitively considers the complex nature of trauma in various settings. In this song we have childhood trauma, bullying, self-hatred and harm, and exclusion, but later on TXT do expand into other areas. Okay, I think I've talked about Crown for long enough, even though I definitely will talk more about this masterpiece in the future. So let's move on to how these lyrics were interpreted in the choreography. Crown's choreography is one which I had previously made a video about. In fact, the only TXT choreography I ever made a video about since I was making my way through ATEEZ's choreographies at that point. I watched the video back and I don't think I really have anything to add to it, so I'll just give an introduction for the choreography and then insert my old video into this one, but I may add a few updates here and there if needed. The choreography for Crown is brilliant and really is the 4th gen choreography in my opinion. As I mentioned earlier, it bridges the gap between boy groups like Stray Kids and ATEEZ and girl groups like ITZY, Idol, and Everglow. Epic. The choreography is truly brilliant in terms of expressing the themes of the song. It does an especially great job of expressing the energy of youth and also using the boys' hands, and in the case of the music video, rotoscoping to express the horns as both horns and a crown, showing the duality of the horns and Yeonjun's changing self-perception. The choreography also requires a lot of teamwork. This is something that a lot of people pointed out during TXT's debut. A lot of their choreography was hard, not only because it required a high level of energy and synchronization and was complicated and detailed, but also because it required a lot of teamwork. I pointed some of this out in my original video. For instance, the moment where Kai, Taehyun, and Beomgyu make wing shapes behind Yeonjun. In this situation, they can't feel each other's movements or even really see each other, which makes it difficult to make the choreography look right and flow well. Soobin and Yeonjun also had trouble with this part where they have to sit together and push each other off the ground. This is arguably easier than the members in the back making wings, since Soobin and Yeonjun can feel each other's movements, but they can't see each other, and if either gets the pressure or distance wrong, they both fall over. TXT's choreographies, especially in their earlier years, are full of tons of elements like this, and it's a testament to their teamwork and skill that they pull it off so well each time. However, it has also led to some fan backlash, as some people think their choreographies have been made purposely difficult in an attempt to make up for a supposed lack of stage presence, the conclusion being that TXT rely too much on flashy acrobatic type choreographies and are in danger because of this. I mean, they have been hurt before with these choreographies, so I suppose this argument from either a fan or hater perspective has validity. Or maybe not, since it, as I mentioned in my original video, seems to have become a poster child for hype choreographies. If you look at those "how would this company choreograph this song" videos, you'll see that HYBE's choreographies are always bouncy and acrobatic, which is something that applies to all of their groups, not just TXT, although TXT did become the most obvious and clear example. Anyway, back to the choreography itself. It also showcases the motifs of magic, duality, especially between angels and devils, and the use of the star. As I mentioned earlier and in my previous choreography analysis video, the choreography is lent a lot of extra context by the epic animation in the music video. So although I didn't explicitly discuss it in the choreography video and will discuss it when we get to the music video, keep in mind that, well, it adds context for a reason, and good context at that. In my original choreography analysis video, I mentioned how the Crown choreography is bouncy and youthful, but also is unstable, almost like they're going off the edge. And yeah, this is something we see in many of TXT's choreographies, not just Crown. Whether it be because of their acrobatics or a conscious choice of their producers and choreographers, many of TXT's choreographies are just on the edge, or are otherwise unbalanced. For some examples, you can think about the chorus of Can't We Just Leave the Monster Alive and the All or Nothing section of Love Song. The love song example is particularly relevant since it shows how, both in the romantic and platonic versions of the storyline, they threw themselves into this relationship with complete trust and codependency, only for the relationship and trust to be broken, in Good Boy Gone Bad and Can't You See Me respectively. Basically, as you might expect from a bunch of cursed and traumatized teens, they're a little bit unhinged. In my original video, I also noted that the group are a well-oiled machine and team, and that there are almost no TXT mistakes you can find, really. Not only did this help them become an example of how incredibly synchronized and polished 4th Gen would become, but it also coincidentally suits the storyline well. Although the friendship version of the storyline has the 5 of them as friends, the romantic version of the storyline kind of has 5 of them as versions of the same person. Hence, it makes sense for them to act as one unit. Honestly, I wish more K-pop groups did this, where all the members kind of represent different facets of the same person. I think Zero Base One kind of do this, but even so, I wish more groups would do it. Okay, now for the video analysis itself. I did make a typo in this original video, so if you can find it, you get a gold star, I guess.
What you looking at? 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 I'm fearless.
Alright, onto the music video. The first thing that most people hear and see, and in the case of Crown, the first thing most people in 2019 would see or hear of TXT in general. Insane to think it all began here. So, how did the music video interpret the lyrics, storyline, and choreography? Well, I already talked about the cutesy and bright styling for the album, which suited the fact that Crown is a bright song with depressing lyrics, and the music video ran with this. Crown is the facade, the smiling mask the members put on, and the mask which most people see, fitting of the name Crown and the bright visuals, while Nap of a Star is the dark half of the story, the lyrics of Crown, or the alternative title, One Day a Horn Grew on My Head. Fittingly, considering it is a mask which has no real depth and which serves no purpose other than self-protection and isolation, Crown's music video is relatively sparse in terms of storyline and treats the concept more playfully. But nonetheless, it does add context to the choreography and lyrics and is still fun and has some unique details. And best of all, it includes the rotoscoped animation, which I love in K-pop music videos, and in general. I mean, just go watch my film time after time if you have any doubts about that. Alright, with that said, let's have a quick little extra note about Crown.
찍고 싶어 사라 찍고 싶어 저 멀리 내 몸이 미쳤나봐 내 머리에 뿌리도 다 어떻게 멈출지 몰라 나 혼자나봐 구해줘 왔자 And now I'm by 버려진 날 찾은 너 구원인 걸까 아침에 불이 달리는 상태 빛의 시가 악마세 그때 눈앞에서 펼쳐진 이 너의 말해줘 너의 반쪽을 완성하는 건 너잖아 내 이름이 불리워진 이 순간 버려진 날 찾은 넌 구원인 걸까 머리에 뿌리 쏟아 두근두근 되는 감각 심장은 대혼란 두리두리 두리셨나 외로운 멈춰는 마 수리수리 멈춰는 마 수리수리 사실 아직도 난 조금 불안해 차가운 냉수와 외로운 중간에 서 있어 Nobody can understand Nobody
Crayon has a choreography version of the music video which includes extra animation to help express the choreography. Most of this isn't super exciting and most of it is in the main music video, but I like to think I'm a pretty thorough person. Hence, I'll run you through some of the quick details in the choreography music video. 빛의 시가 악마세 그때 눈앞에서 펼쳐진 이 너의 말해줘 너의 반쪽을 완성하는 건 너잖아 내 이름이 불리워진 이 순간 날개도 나와 같은 아픔 머리에 뿌리 쏟아 I love it 이어서 완벽해 이제 두리 사실 아직도 난 조금 불안해 차가운 냉수와 외로운 중간에 서 있어 Nobody can understand 어제가 너보처럼 내 세상을 바꿔 난 이제 난 아파 And now, the next song on our list, Our Summer. Our Summer is the mandatory, summer song on the album, considering the album was released when Korea was going into spring and summer. It serves the added purpose of Well, the seasons as a metaphor for life. Summer is when you're in your prime and is often associated with youth. This works even better for TXT. TXT, especially in this album, are all about the transition from childhood to adulthood. And in this season metaphor, spring would be your childhood and summer would be your adulthood. So not only are TXT declaring this is the prime of our lives and we're taking over this industry, this is our summer with this song, they're also subtly expressing how they've moved from spring to summer and now need to lay claim to and grow into that title. I also really like this song. It's super relaxing and I've fallen asleep to it on multiple occasions. That's falling asleep in a good way, by the way. Alright, let's talk about the lyrics. Our Summer may not be a pure storyline song the way Crown is, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have TXT lyrical motifs. Namely, making a promise to explore the beautiful world while escaping the grey and bleary city. The city versus nature being a huge part of TXT's early storyline and a lyrical motif in general. Another interesting aspect of the song is duality and paradoxes. For instance, an alternate translation in which Subin describes the city as his favourite city, which is odd considering it's grey and depressing. We see these opposites, contrasts, and paradoxes throughout TXT's discography, but in different ways. For instance, in Blue Orangaeade, these paradoxes were seen as positive, and opposites attract. But in Our Summer, they seem to express the conflicting feelings TXT/the audience, and presumably youths, have about the world. Youth being a time full of conflicting emotions. As I mentioned in my original lyric analysis post, the song is a great B-side to support the plot and themes of Star, specifically reinforcing concepts like eternity, youth, and promises, and it led nicely into the Magic album. And I think this kind of album cohesion shows how Star really deserves to be on the best albums list. The song itself starts with the bleak and depressing city, a grey forest, muddy, noise, and never-ending final exams, the latter being very relevant to youth. In contrast, the next few lines describe a fantasy world instead, and the arrival of magic and waves, far more organic and inviting than a grey city. Interestingly enough, Kai's line here, "Your swiftly appearing fantasy, it shines like magic," is also translated as, "At one point appeared your illusion, it shines like magic." I'd desperately like to know which is more fitting from the original Korean, since, well, illusions carry a lot of weight in the storyline. Kai, were the magic and freedom illusions or not? Or maybe they were and weren't at the same time, hence continues the multiple versions of the TXT storyline. Next we get more description of the stars and the seasons, and how the boys will feel as if they're in summer as long as they're together. I hope I don't need to tell you that stars and togetherness are important for TXT. Then we get into some odd lines. Yeonjun's first line in this part is translated as both "your fresh fragrance, your sparkling eyes," and "your eyes shine, let your heart shine." And one of Subin's lines has an odd duality of translation, where one translation is "even the earth dies," very gothic and doomsday-y, and the other said "earth is breathing." Very different meanings there. Then, of course, fitting the title of the song, we get the contrast of the hot sun, the grey city, and the blue waves, with the waves coming over the city, expressing, presumably, how joy and togetherness make the world brighter and nicer. Oddly enough, an alternate translation here translates Kai's lines as "it's grey and blue with a pouring green wave over the city," which suggests that the city has at least some colour and beauty, but which also blue and green, aka the cat. The cat, what shall we do? Next we get some repeated lines for the chorus, and the mention of the seasons coming together. I'm not entirely sure if this is supposed to refer to the passage of time, time standing still, summer being the superior season for TXT, or a combination of all three, but basically there is summer, and the seasons are together just like the members. Then mentions of the eternal promise to be together and the need to believe. This arguably references the Star and Magic Island, and by extension, Nap of a Star and Can't You See Me, when they break the promise to be together. And with another chorus which adds nothing new, that's it. A nice, simple and well-rounded song, although it is relatively forgotten. A problem shared by the Dream chapter in general, it was key to this album and helped round out the album and give context to the other songs. Most notably, it kind of gets a sequel in We Lost the Summer, which, of course, I will discuss in a later video. Alright, let's talk about the special video TXT released with these lyrics. TXT released a special Selfie music video for our summer alongside the song. It's clearly not supposed to be storyline based, and is more of just a cute video for the fans. It's nice and sweet and playful and leans into their concept of youth. I'll point out some of my favourite moments from it, but there isn't really anything to analyse, except that they were super bad at lip syncing and looked awkward. Alright, with that said, let's move on to the next song. Probably most people's favourite song that they've been waiting for me to discuss. Cat&Dog, a song which kind of shaped the fandom, but which honestly I don't think gets enough appreciation. Mind you, how many times have I said that in this video in terms of Star and the Dream chapter? Cat&Dog, although mostly a meme, is, believe it or not fully a meme. Believe it or not, it does have some degree of relevance to the storyline, and certainly has relevance to this album and to TXT's themes. Most notably, as you'd expect from the title, duality. Apart from duality, the song does the bulk of the work on this album to introduce the animal motif to TXT's storyline. This may sound odd considering all of the barking mowers do at concerts and all of the Cinderella memes, but Cat&Dog, which yes, I will continue to write like that for those who are reading the subtitles, actually is important. TXT have a lot of animal imagery and language in their storyline. Some of them have animal-inspired curses, they have connections to animals, they are often portrayed with animal characteristics or features, and of course they are connected to nature, since, well, in at least one version of their storyline, they grew up on Magic Island, a literal forest island. We can see their animal affinity most notably in Cat&Dog and Puma, and in the concept trailer for Minisode 3 when they rescue a fox from a museum exhibit. But there are tons of other animals in the storyline. The giant sand creature and the crows in Frost, the butterflies in various music videos, the living forest and many animals of Magic Island and Nap of a Star, and of course the cat itself. And it all started here. How wondrous. So let's talk about it. Once you attain a suspension of disbelief and consider the importance of this song in terms of animalistic TXT, this song is actually pretty snazzy, discussing other important themes in their storyline like togetherness, eternity, loyalty, and promises. This is another one that you can read in either a romantic or platonic way, but of course most fans read it as romantic. Other than the elements I discussed previously, it isn't that deep, hence why I said it isn't fully a meme, but it's pretty close. I do want to mention though that although calling themselves dogs and cats could be a bit weird, I think an important part of this song is that every single trait they mention in regard to animals is positive. They mention their loyalty, their charm, and love. This first of all just positions animals positively in their storyline, which continues throughout their careers, and also evokes the idea of an animal familiar who is loyal and who are often portrayed as charming and funny. They also, of course, are connected to magic. Oh, also, for some reason, my labels for which members sing which lines was wrong here, so ignore that if you're looking at my old post. We start by introducing the concept of cats and dogs, and of our sign, aka destiny and soulmates. Now, it's going to sound crazy that I'm even considering this, but I do often wonder whether this song is supposed to be metaphorically animals, actually animals, or kind of simile animals. The start of the song uses similes, which I directly contrasted with the metaphorical use in Puma in my original analysis post. You might say, Casper, isn't it obvious it's a metaphor? But this is a magical world, and they literally lived on Magic Island, have magical powers, and travel between the worlds via a magical subway train, so I think the concept of shapeshifting isn't that far out. And I shouldn't need to tell you that this is bringing in the animal motif, regardless of how literal it is. Anyway, Subin has a line here which can be translated as either our sign wasn't a coincidence only if I had you, or our relationship isn't serendipitous but indistinct if I can just have you. I personally prefer the serendipity translation, not only because serendipity is a lovely word, but also because it connects the song, however subtly, to Jimin's song Serendipity, and we know TXT have referenced and had tie-ins with BTS's storyline in the past, so it wouldn't surprise me if this was the intention. I'm not sure about the relationship being indistinct though. Is it just supposed to be an opposite to serendipity? That this version of Destiny and Soulmates are indistinct? Or maybe it's just a lost in translation situation. Next, we have Beomgyu talking about not wanting to just be friends and not wanting to be apart, and of course, about being together forever. Then Yeonjun comes in with basically more of the same. He has a line which can be translated as keep on grooming, keep petting, next to you, give me some space, or keep me constantly next to you, clear a space for me. I personally prefer the second translation since I think it emphasizes the themes of the song and story and of being together. Next, we have more comparisons to animals, annoying but charming with attitude. Kai has a line here which is localized as you can't imagine my charm, but which seems to be more directly translated as you can't imagine my aegyo, which is fun. The next segment of the song just continues the same motifs. Positive qualities of pets, being together and caring for each other, and animal traits. But it also brings in another motif of TXT's, games, with Subin's line I want to play frisbee with you, and brings in the concept of duality with Taehyun's line you shine in red and blue in my black and white world. Then we get a repeated chorus, and then comes Yeonjun's iconic Cinderella line. Now, as silly as this is, it does actually have relevance to their storyline motifs. The Cinderella verse leans heavily into the ideas of magic and transformations, and of course the animal traits. It also introduces the idea of midnight, nighttime and times of day being important in TXT's storyline, since the changing of times of day is also a time of transformation. This idea of transformation is important to TXT since, well, they're all about youth, and youth is a time of change and transformation. Yeonjun's verse also mentions being turned from a kitten into a Jindo dog. I had to look this one up, but it turns out that Jindo dogs are a breed of dog native to Korea, which are prized for their loyalty, so this analogy fits well with TXT's storyline. I'm not sure what they mean by turning from a kitten into a dog, since outside of the cat with heterochromia, cats in general haven't been portrayed negatively in TXT's storyline. But regardless of the symbolism of the cat, being a Jindo dog is definitely a good thing. The end of Yeonjun's verse also includes the game motif Subin introduced, and mentions of being together until they cross the rainbow bridge, which is obviously about being together but is also about another all-important TXT motif, death. And that's it for unique lyrics in the song. Everything else is repeated. So with that said, let's talk about the choreography. The Cat&Dog choreography is generally fun, playful, and energetic, suiting both the vibes of the song and lyrics and also the concept of the album, and also the fact that it's a more light-hearted, borderline meme song. There's lots of poor motions, so many in fact that I won't point them all out. Oddly enough, whenever I see these movements I assume they're cats, but I don't know if this was the intention. To me, they just seemed more cat-like. So basically, the choreography includes a lot more cats as opposed to dogs, which is funny since the lyrics reference dogs more than cats. All part of TXT's duality and balance, I guess. The choreography is quite creative in general, even for a TXT choreography. It creates some unusual shapes and formations to tell the story, and also has a lot of floor choreography and use of varied levels, which is interesting. Watching Subin do this choreography is very funny, since he just kind of has the same facial expression the whole time. I don't know if he was tired or hated the song or was just trying to look cool and kind of failing, but he looks kind of dead inside and a little bit awkward the whole time. On the flip side, Yeonjin looks super locked in, and like he's performing this singular dance practice like it will make or break his debut. He also lip syncs most of the song, which seems to be something idols who are super serious about performing like to do. Overall, I had the most fun watching Beomgyu. I think he was the member who best suited the performances in this album, or at least he suited Blue Orangeade and Cat&Dog the best, since we all know that I think Subin was the best in Crown. Gyu looked like he was really concentrated, but in a good way, and he almost always had this small, sweet smile on his face. His dance was also super nice and fluid, and I think his facial expressions suited the song the best. Anyway, with that said, let's look at the choreography. And now, on to the music video. The music video for Cat&Dog isn't super heavy on the storyline as with the song itself. It's mostly silly and designed to show how this group embodies youth, but I will point out a few small things which happen to show up in the video, mostly dreams.
Feel like I'm your cat, I'm your dog. 내 두 눈엔 너밖에 안 보여. 나는 너만 있으면 넌 네 옆에 별을 자르. 그래 네 옆에 별을 자르. Keep on grooving it. 내 백색 상수 넌 빨갛고 파랗게 빛이 나.
Cat&Dog also has an English version and music video for that English version. I feel like people forget the English version exists, because I certainly did. And they forget with good reason. The lyrics for the English version of the song are mega cringe and make the song even more memey. The music video is almost frame for frame the same as the original, so it doesn't have anything to be analysed. But I will talk briefly about the lyrics. So, first of all, they are just hilariously wacko. Like, first of all, Kai talks about turning from a cat into a dog. This is even more odd evidence that maybe, just maybe, we don't like cats in this universe. It's also another example of transformations. Next, Kai talks about wanting to be taken on a walk. Interesting. And Supin has a line that I'm surprised didn't become infamous. Watch me be the loyalist of all, okay baby, here's the leash. Lovely. Next, another line in the chorus that should have become infamous, as Bomgyu says, "It's no coincidence, it's a kitty incidence," which makes me laugh every time. The rest of the chorus is pretty unexciting. Most of it is just pretty accurate translations for the original version. At the start of the next verse, Kai has a line where he mentions being given a halo, which is obviously an angel reference, but which could have various connotations. For instance, it could be about Kai having angel wings in the storyline, but could also be a reference to Yeonjun's line of going over the rainbow bridge and thus pets dying. I mean, that would make sense if you considered the theory that the entirety of the music video is in the afterlife. Then we have a mention of being a good boy and hoping that the, presumably, audience doesn't say no. This not saying no is a continuation of the desperation motif we've seen earlier and will continue to see in later albums. Then we have the line, "When you hold me, feed me love, it's perfect and you know it. Follow you in circles and no, that is not a joke, baby." Which has no storyline meaning unless you want to talk about going in circles, which is storyline relevant. Next, the line "to the bitter end," yet another reference to death. How lovely. It seems like this English version is darker than the Korean one. Yeonjun's verse, presumably by nature of being a rap verse, has been most significantly changed. He's basically got a lot of dog imagery and this cute line, "Fight for you in the biggest pack of wolves, they be racing but I'm coming in first Impala." He also mentions dreams right at the end. Taehyun and Subin's bridge mentions no one else speaking the language between the two of them, aka connections and destiny. So that's about it for Cat&Dog. Now onto the final song of the album, Nap of a Star. Nap of a Star. I might cry just thinking about it. Nap of a Star is, in my opinion, TXT's greatest masterpiece, and is the song that defines them and their concept as a group. The duo of Crown and Nap of a Star is absolutely awe-inducing, and I don't think I can express to you in words exactly how perfect this duo is. TXT did something very unique with this duo which perfectly displayed the concept of the album. Crown was the title track, which nicely expresses the happy on the outside, sad on the inside concept of the album. Usually we would expect the story of the title track to be told in, well, the music video for the title track, but TXT instead used the title track and the design of the album to express the concept of the happy mask, while they used the B-side music video, Nap of a Star, to tell the story told in Crown in more detail, and to express the hidden depths of the song. And it is glorious. Alright, this could get long. Let's take a look at what is probably the least exciting part of this song first, the lyrics. The Nap of a Star lyrics seem to be mostly focused on rounding out the album by, well, introducing or kind of hinting at the next one. The song describes the nature and feeling of Magic Island, which will become a focus of the next album. In my original lyric analysis post, I talk a lot about the gothic elements of the song. The sinister feeling that something bad is coming, constant anxieties, things not being quite right, dissociation, and more. And this is something that definitely applies to Nap of a Star, sonically, visually, and lyrically, and which also applies to Magic Island. As we see in the music video and other TXT content, Magic Island is a place that can be lovely, magical, and safe, but can also become dark and full of dangers if the boys do something wrong, and which holds other dark elements. The song is odd, magical, and the lullaby ballad style of the music evokes this well, along with the feeling of dissociation and a sense of nostalgia. It's a very cohesive song. The lyrics, sound, and music video all work together to perfectly evoke in the audience the actual feeling of being on Magic Island. This is also a song which can be read either romantically or platonically. The symbolism of the star is clear. When the boys are together, the star will shine and everything will be magical and good. But what actually is the star? Is it just an embodiment of them being together? Or does it represent Moa, who would be represented as more of a love interest? There's several parts of the song and storyline which represent the star in slightly different ways to confuse this definition. For instance, the first line of the song can be translated as either, I can see even if you're not in front of me, or I can see even if you're not by my side. Although they essentially mean the same thing, togetherness, the first translation has more romantic connotations while the second has more platonic connotations. Either way, at the start of the song, we're talking about disappearances, connectedness even when not physically together, and destiny. Then the concept of anxiety comes in. Even when we're apart and anxious, we can believe in each other, which is easier said than done, especially since Kai then talks about being far apart and thus presumably loneliness. The next section of the song is really heavy on the motifs of togetherness, dreams, youth and memories, and night and the sky. Nap of a Star is by nature a song with a lot of celestial references, and defines this celestial motif in the rest of TXT's story. So it makes sense that in this section we have mentions of the sun setting, the dark night sky, and the moonlight. There are a few interesting alternate translations here. For instance, the second line in this section is either translated as, I want to be your nap so I can dream with you at any time, or as, in your sleep I want to dream with you no matter when. The second implies that the boys may well be able to share each other's dreams when they're physically apart. I mean, I guess the first translation could also do that, but I thought of it when I saw the second translation more. There's also the second last line, which is translated as either, even if the memories of my childhood that danced in the moonlight grow faint, Or memories of childhood dancing in the stars even if it's fading away now. Okay, first of all, regardless of which translation you go with, they're both absolutely brilliant and beautiful lines that poignantly express the nostalgia and sadness one may feel when growing up and reminiscing on their childhood, and of slowly losing these memories as you grow. Perfect. But also, the second translation explicitly mentions the star, which is nice, considering this is the star song, and talks about the memories fading, as opposed to the first translation which simply talks about them growing faint. I think fades gives a better sense of loss, but that could just be personal interpretation. Now, while that verse, segment, stanza, you can see I know nothing about music, was quite positive, this next section is quite negative. It brings in a lot of the gothic motifs we associate with Magic Island, a dark silence, the scary night sky, being forgotten, the loss of the feeling of magic, tears vanishing, and so on. It evokes a sense of loss and loneliness, and the dark silence evokes the image of the star becoming dark in the music video, the literal nap of the star. Or the death of the star if you want to be more gothic. The tears mention here is interesting. This, combined with the mention of someone comforting someone else, reminds me of the ghost girl in Eternally, who may or may not be the star, Moa, and/or a member of G-Friend. This section also has some alternate translations. For instance, the first and second lines are translated as either "the dark silence that does not answer when I call for you in the night sky scares me, in case it'll be forgotten like this," or "even if I call out to you in the night sky, I'm afraid of the silence, there is no answer. Maybe it's fine to forget now." I think the second translation is better localized, but it also seems to change the meaning to make it more okay to accept things being forgotten. There's also the fifth line, which is translated as both "in the dream you came to me slowly and spoke to me," and "you came closer to be in dreams." I think the second translation is more poetic, although it makes less sense. It also, interestingly enough, suggests an ongoing story as it's in present tense. Maybe I'm looking too far into it. Anyway, my favourite line in this section is probably that those moments that had felt like magic and that the night sky I had walked with you should simply vanish like a dream. Which I think is mega depressing and poignant, and which is also sung by Subin, so bonus points I guess. And now we get to the end of the song. Every time I do these lyric analyses, I get shocked at how few lyrics there are for a full song, but especially in the case of Nap of a Star, it makes sense. The song is over 4 minutes long. Can you imagine that in today's K-pop market? And doesn't really have repeated choruses, and each line is sung so slowly that there aren't actually that many individual lines in the song. Fun fact. Anyway, the last few moments evoke this dream-like trance. The subject of the song comforts the boys, the dreams are mentioned again, and the idea of going back in time. Finally, Subin sings about remembering the magical nights and the sparkling night sky forever. Now, the fact that the sky is sparkling is good. It means the star has been awoken by the boys being together, and the line, "are engraved in my heart," shows how important this moment is. To round this off, I'll read to you my final conclusions from my original post. It has an indescribable feeling, very Magic Island and very magical. It also adds a few motifs such as the ghost girl and the importance of memories. It adds to the story described in Crown, duh, and wonderfully accompanies the music video. Nice. Speaking of, let's talk about that music video. Nap of a Star has no choreography, so we're straight into the music video, which is almost 5.5 minutes long. The first of TXT's long storyline music videos, but by no means the longest. And first of all, the production crew on this music video. I am in love with them. The visual creative team for the music video is made up of Kim Sunghyun, Lee Hyunju, and Gabrielle Cho, none of whom I could find details on outside of Gabrielle Cho's possible Instagram page. Either way, they presumably would have had creative input on the music video, which was clearly good. The team itself is led by producer Moon Young Lee and director Wonmo Song, who seem to have worked together both previously and since. Both have worked with Luna before and were also the director and producer for An Team's War Cry. Speaking of insanely good storylines and music videos, Songwon Mo has also directed for ATEEZ, including Bouncy, and for Anteam, including Warcry and Firework, and has continued to work with Luna through Artemis. He's also worked further with TXT, including directing Eternally. He is also the co-founder of production company DigiPD, which is the production company that worked on Nap of a Star, and has been involved in many other music videos from 2007 onwards. This includes work with SHINee, Ladies Code, IU, EXID, Orange Caramel, A-Pink, Kara, Mamamoo, Psy, Dreamcatcher, Boa, Idol, IZ*ONE, 17, P1 Harmony, and the list goes on and on and on. Basically, this guy seems to be living my ideal life, directing almost exclusively storyline-heavy K-pop music videos. Anyway, now that I officially stan the director more than the group, why did I even bring this up? Well, not only did I want to communicate to you that the creative team behind this music video is stacked, but I wanted to bring them up because they likely had at least some input into the concept of the music video, which is important because that would have included the most salient aspect of it, the production design, which includes the sets, costumes, and general look of the film. So one or more of these wonderful people probably made the decision to base the look of the music video on A Trip to the Moon, a 1902 silent film which has since become pretty iconic for its unique style and contributions to film in general. As someone who enjoys history and film, and whose first film was partially visually inspired by silent films, well, of course I'd like this decision. Nap of a Star uses many silent film elements, including using a film grain filter, and includes dialogue cards. It also includes hand-drawn clouds and other elements which look like they came straight out of the late 1800s, and mimics a low frame rate, making movement look jerky and unpolished. It also doesn't hide the fact that it's a set. Everything looks kind of plasticky, 2D, hand-drawn, fake, and surreal. Surrealism being something we see in association with Magic Island, and all of these visual elements being in A Trip to the Moon. Some aspects like Kai's wings have steampunk features, and some visual effects like the lightning mimic the kind of inorganic visual effects often seen in older films. All of this helps add to the magical, surreal, and almost uncanny valley feeling of the music video. This is even seen in the sound design, which at the beginning of the film and end has a grainy kind of old film sound. Oh, brilliant. Before I start talking about the music video, let me give a little aside. I mentioned it earlier, but still, trigger warning for this one. I imagine if you're watching this video, you've seen the Nap of a Star music video, and if you have, you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, well, you remember those trigger warnings at the start of the video? Yeah, this is where it gets dark. The music video begins with the title card, and of course with Chapter 1, which reads, "This story is about 5 boys and a star." Which, like, yeah, it is. That's some silent film logic. Tell the audience the story before you show it. The page turns and we're given our first look at Magic Island, a surreal and childlike place full of magic. The clouds are a combination of realistic ones and the hand-drawn ones I previously mentioned, and there are 3 kinds of stars: photographic stars, hand-drawn stars, and the star, the huge steampunk star that lights up the whole sky in place of the moon. It's turned by gears and is clearly tacked to the wall, hence the fakeness of the star. The star has 5 points, and the pathways on the ground in the centre of the island below also have 5 paths. I shouldn't have to tell you why. Anyway, the island itself looks like a diorama, and the trees and paths looking snowy compared with the running stream and the snowless ground adds an extra sense of magic. Also, there's an animatronic owl at the front of the screen, owls being a common symbol in witchcraft. Now, the boys themselves, they're in these cute little monster costumes with cardboard heads. You can see this 2 ways. First, you could see them as having originated as magical creatures, not humans, and that when they went out into the real world, they lost this magical aspect and became human. This isn't out of the realm of possibility. The whole world of this music video is abstract, so it would make sense for the directors to show a potentially inhuman nature through these boxes, rather than CGI. However, the other interpretation is far more popular and likely, which is just that these are kids being kids, and the boxes represent the youthful joy and creativeness of kids, and also how the kids like to make believe and play pretend. Anyway, there's 5 young TXT members playing happily together on the island and using their telescope to look at the sky, which makes sense considering how important the sky is for TXT. In the sky, the star shines brightly and rotates relatively smoothly. The next narration card reads, "The boys and the star made a promise." We know from context clues that this promise is to stay together. I don't think literally any fan or theorist would dispute that. But even if you had doubts, the fact that the next shot is the boys together with the star gets that meaning across. The next card is a dialogue card, speaking for the boys, who say, "Let's meet again here even if we separate." Which, having just seen the last 2 shots, doesn't seem like a good idea. And thus the boys go their own separate paths, both literally and figuratively. The most obvious interpretation of this scene is as they get older they try to be more grown up and less childish, and move on to different goals or otherwise move apart. Whether that be because they have different passions or they move schools or whatever else, they are still apart. And that's the most important part. I do think it's hilarious that even when they go down the paths, Bluehead, I don't know which member that is, goes far enough that they go behind the projected image of the stars, which adds even more to the fake silent film aspect of the music video, and also to the childlike wonder of the projected stars. Also, Redhead leaves first, but I don't know if that means anything. Speaking of the head colours, the monsters have different designs which could have relevance to their final curses, but I'm not sure. For instance, Bluehead has large ears, so is he Subin? Orangehead has 2 different eyes, but I don't think it's enough to make me think it's Taehyun. Redhead has horns, is that Yeonjin? But Orangehead kind of has horns too. Greenhead has wings, so is that Kai or is that supposed to represent Bomgyu's back spines? And none of them are wearing the pajamas Yeonjin wears in the next scene. I feel like this is pretty much the only failing of the film. It would be fun to make each of the monsters correspond to the member they eventually became, basically foreshadowing. But knowing how these things are made and seeing how detailed the rest of this music video is, I can only assume that this possibility was discussed before the costumes were made, and they decided not to make it super obvious for whatever reason? Interesting. Maybe it was supposed to be obvious and I'm blind. Anyway, once all of the boys leave, their promise is broken and the star grinds to a halt, breaks down and loses its light. This is the nap of the star or the death of the star, depending on how seriously you take their storyline. Once the star has fallen asleep, it no longer protects the island, and a presumably evil witch appears, while lightning strikes, wind blows, and rain falls. And this butterfly appears. Is this the least subtle butterfly effect reference ever? The next narration card simply says, "As the boys separated over time, the star fell asleep." Yup. But then it's followed by larger implications. Then the night sky lost its starlight and people lost their dreams. This is when we can recall the dark silence from the Nap of a Star lyrics, and the idea of losing childhood memories, which, sure, aren't exactly the same as dreams, but regardless of what you interpret dreams as, whether it be memories, wonder, actual dreams, or goals for the future, losing them is bad, and this shows how the members of TXT have, in a butterfly effect, had a massive impact on the world by separating themselves. Then we move on to the card saying, "And years have passed," and on to Chapter 2. Chapter 2 begins with Yeonjin waking up in his room. Now, first of all, this is a teenage boy's room from a fairy tale, not from real life. I don't have too much to say about the room, but there are books, which makes sense for the dream chapter and other chapters, a model presumably of the planets, a cactus, aka something with spines that is painful, and a tree and a cuckoo clock, both relating to nature. The wallpaper is also very foresty, since, well, the boys belong to the forest. Anyway, Yeonjin has woken up and realizes he now has horns, which he isn't very happy about. This brings us back to the very first lines of Crown. "Who's staring there at me blank in the mirror? It cannot be me. Dizzy and there's something on my head." This moment is nicely accompanied by a dialogue card reading, "Oh my god, I have horns in my head." At this point, Yeonjun basically has a panic attack, and I love how the producers added this horror music and made the light and lightning flash. This is all very classic horror movie and especially silent film horror. Us getting X-ray vision to see Yeonjun cowering under the sheets is another one of these old film shenanigans, and nicely shows his body language and thus his anxiety and fear. But as much as he tries to hide, the horns continue to grow. This part of the music video reflects the first verse of Crown, wanting to run away and disappear, feeling crazy, being unable to suppress the horns, and becoming a monster. Then we get another narration card reading, "The boy decided to run into the deep forest in fear of becoming a monster," which just summarizes the part of Crown I just mentioned to you. Hence, Yeonjun runs away into a forest with spiders, bats, and lots of lightning. This forest is obviously fake, but we can see skeletons and witches in the foreground and background. There's a spider in front of the camera, there's snakes, and the butterflies hovering around Yeonjun's torch are behaving very unusually, showing the danger of Magic Island. And thus we move on to chapter 3, where Yeonjun, shivering, tries to make a fire in the forest and sleep, but the fire is quickly blown out. And also there's a skull right next to his fire, which is lovely. I find it morbidly amusing how the butterflies stick with Yeonjun the whole time. It's like they're taunting him, saying these are the consequences of his actions. Anyway, as Yeonjun sleeps, presumably in a dream, as described in the lyrics of Nap of a Star, he sees the other members in a brighter and kinder version of Magic Island. This is where we see their curses/powers, or as the story calls them, pains. Subin is shown in a clearing with bats, a deer, and the broken star in the background. He has elf ears and is listening to the island? This makes sense, since the island is sentient, but it also looks kind of quirky, so all the better for a quirky group and music video. Also, there's a skeleton next to him, which is nice. There's also, you guessed it, butterflies. Subin also has this broken umbrella that he seems to be trying to use as a satellite dish. It obviously won't work, but it communicates the space idea, and that he's trying to reach the other members. Because all of the other members, similarly to Yeonjun, have developed these pains and have either been cast out of society or have self-isolated like Yeonjun. They all know what it's like, and they're all, presumably, looking for each other and remembering their promise, except for Yeonjun, who's just too depressed. Next, Taehyun is in this pink tree which has a nasty face. We'll see Taehyun in another tree on Magic Island in the future. He's got a skeleton buddy and an owl buddy, presumably in an attempt to associate him with wisdom, and of course the star is always in the back. He has a spyglass which has a searchlight. I can only assume the searchlight is being produced by his eye, which has the star in it. Presumably his power is to have extra sight, whether that be literally or metaphorically, and to remember the importance of the star since it's literally in his eye. Next we get to Gyu, who's in this hole in the ground and has porcupine quills. His scene is very unexciting, but he does look through the mouth of his hole to presumably see that the time has come for him to emerge and find the others. This also could be like a literal representation of being so embarrassed that you want to crawl into a hole in the ground and disappear. Finally we get to Kai, arguably the second most important in the storyline after Yeonjun. He's in a graveyard surrounded by bats, a stag, and this one skeleton. How many people have died on Magic Island? Anyway, Kai has these mechanical wings and grips his heart, because he is the only member other than Yeonjun to have two pains or curses. He has wings and a missing heart, hence why he can be both an angel and a devil at the same time. Anyway, this brings us into chapter 4, where a massive burst of lightning wakes Yeonjun and we get some lovely creepy doll music. Two orbs, one blue, one green, appear in the background. Okay, guys, I know we all hate eyes being written as orbs in fanfictions, but in this case they are legitimately orbs. Anyway, Yeonjin is skedaddling, or at least doing his best to, because the cat has appeared, and the cat gives him his second pain, the cut across his neck, which is, a pretty obvious symbol of murder and silencing, if nothing else. It's also very reminiscent of him being a stag, and well, stags getting their heads cut off. Now, this cat has a lot of potential meanings. A lot of people have talked about it potentially being a spirit or demon, or it being a representation of death, and lots of people have talked about whether it's a good cat or a bad cat. If nothing else, it seems to be a black cat with heterochromia, which is very witchy. I personally think the cat is some kind of cosmic entity that changes meaning depending on the part of the story we look at. In this case, it's a representation of death and also of Yeonjin's own self-doubt and hatred. The manipulation of the cat sends Yeonjin into a spiral of self-hatred which has previously been described in Crown, being a monster and the only bad thing in the world. He stumbles into this clearing, which is designed in a very gothic fashion to resemble blood vessels. Now, guys, this is the scene that made me really fall in love with TXT, and is the scene that I think embodies the music video interpretation of their lyricism to the fullest. It's also one I think a lot of fans have personally appreciated. I'm not going to mince words here. Yeonjin is trying to kill himself, or at the very least commit extreme levels of self-harm. I don't think this can even be called a metaphor at this point, because not only is he literally self-harming by trying to rip his horns out, but this is also just so obvious that I don't think anyone could misinterpret it. But regardless, I think this scene is wonderfully done. We have seen over the course of the music video the pain and self-hatred that Yeonjin has developed, and we've seen, condensed for runtime of course, the hardships he's gone through in the forest. He's been cold, hungry, scared, and in pain, all because he chose to self-isolate because his horns were so horrific. The cat represents the dark and unwanted thoughts we all have inside ourselves, and it has got into Yeonjin's head and silenced his voice, literally, to take over. Thus, he feels that the only way to get himself out of this is to remove his horns, or die trying. And it wouldn't be that bad if he dies anyway, because he's a monster and evil, right? So even though this scene shows through the blood vessel trees, the white flashes of lightning, and the blood running down his hands, how hard and painful both physically and mentally this action is, Yeonjin is determined to go through with it. Such is the depth of his self-hatred. The thunder crashes sound like the cracks he must be creating in his bones, and he's surrounded by thorns, which both mirror the shape of his horns and shows how he is literally in a cage of thorny thoughts of self-hatred. The thorns grow as more blood spurts from the wound, which even turns the whole scene red, and he is finally able to snap a horn off, covering himself in his own blood. Whether because of his failure or pain, or because he just tore off a part of himself, Yeonjin is left convulsing in the snow when a bright light appears. Kai. This mirrors the lines in Crown. Are you my saviour who found me wandering, and do your own wings make you feel the same pain as me? Thus Kai, a literal angel in this music video and pristinely covered in white, appears, followed by the other members. Kai takes Yeonjin's blood-stained hand and the members comfort him, standing to see that the star has been relit, this time with a warmer and more golden glow. At this point, oddly enough, we get the TU logo, the TU being for newbie fans the TXT universe, which was pretty much replaced by Starseekers later on. Keep in mind that this is the first TU logo, making it the first TU video. Of course, the other music videos, especially Crown, were relevant, but the TU videos are the ones that do the bulk of the storytelling. We are then given the following information via narration cards. The boys met again and the star woke up. The boy's fate. Now something magical will happen. Now obviously this sums up the end of the story we've just seen, and also hints at what will come next. The boys will have a shared fate, and now that they're back together, more magic will happen. And that's the end of the music video. Let's talk about it. This was a seriously hard-hitting way to come into the industry. TXT came out of the gate swinging with storyline-heavy music videos that also discussed important topics, most notably in this case, youth mental health. Youth mental health is a theme that TXT have explored throughout their entire careers, but it all started here with this wondrous, or depressing I guess, music video. The entire music video follows a story that many people following TXT, whether they be teens, young adults, or older adults, would find compelling and often sadly relatable. Change is an inevitable part of life and especially adolescence, and this change can lead to many of the things depicted in the music video: losing friends, changing life paths, and changing as a person. Prevalence of youth mental health concerns is quite high, both because of these changes and other issues. Looking at Australian statistics, because that's close to home both literally and figuratively, the Australian Bureau of Statistics reported that in the 2020 to 2022 period, 1.7% of people had self-harmed in the previous 12 months, representing over 340,000 people, and over 1 in 4 females 16 to 24 had self-harmed in their lifetime, females having a higher incidence of self-harm, in Australia at least. Additionally, in this time period, 3.3% of people aged 16 to 85 reported having experienced suicidal thoughts or behaviours in the previous 12 months, with 0.3% of people actively attempting to take their own life. That is over 644,000 Australians, not including young teens and those over 85, who actively considered taking their own lives. These aren't small numbers, and this doesn't even account for the people who actually succeeded, or for people who don't self-report, or who lie on surveys out of guilt, shame, or other emotions. Now, these statistics do come from the COVID period, but this was a massive issue before and has been a massive issue since, although most data is yet to be released. In 2019, the Australian Government's Institute of Health and Welfare reported 461 deaths by suicide among those 15 to 24, which is a rate of 14 people per 100,000. But even the government acknowledges that these statistics may be underrepresentative, as they only capture those who are present in hospitals or other recorded mortalities. They don't record those with suicidal ideation and intentional self-harm, and don't record those who may have died by self-harm in other ways, or where the cause of death wasn't fully obvious. But either way, this is very high. It's significantly higher than, for instance, the maternal mortality rate at birth, which was about 5.6 per 100,000 in 2019. Additionally, Black Dog Institute, a mental organisation in Australia, reports that suicide was the #1 cause of death for those between 15 and 44 in Australia, a statistic backed up by 2023 statistics, which report that an insanely high 33.6% of deaths in those 15 to 24 were suicides. I've been talking about this for potentially too long, but really I don't think it is too long, especially not in a video about TXT's storyline of all things. My point is, there is a youth mental health crisis in the world right now. I don't think many trained professionals would disagree with that, and both direct and indirect self-harm and suicide are major health issues among youths. TXT/Big Hit have chosen to make their concept youth, and if one is to discuss youth in art, the issue of mental health will come up eventually. So TXT and the team behind them made it part of their story, in what I genuinely think was the best way possible. TXT used this fantastical concept and aesthetic to explore the visceral depths of youth experiences and emotions. Yeonjun attempts suicide in a place that looks like a child's playground, or like it's a child's cute little forest diorama. The tonal disconnect between these two things, and yet the ways in which they are related through youth, and through losing a sense of safety and growing up too quickly, is depressing in a way that's hard to express in words. I think the directors, other staff, and members of the group handled this music video in a very sensitive way. The story is obvious and explicit, both emotionally and visually, and even the childlike touches can't hide that, because Yeonjun can no longer be protected by the innocence of childhood. But even though the story is clear, it isn't contrived, but instead is realistic, using the horns as a metaphor for any number of life experiences. Similarly to Crown, it isn't torture porn, but an artistic and at times viscerally abstract representation of the extremes of self-hatred many of TXT's audience members have experienced. And although I'm sure that some people would disagree, I personally think that, both as a psychology student and from experience, this is very psychologically accurately portrayed, lyrically, emotionally, and visually. And this psychologically accurate and artistic portrayal of the various experiences and traumas of life and youth is a theme we will continue to see throughout TXT's storyline, and is one of the reasons I most enjoy them and appreciate them as a group. It's also the way in which I think they have the best chance of making a mark on the industry. This is poignant, expressive, and meaningful, and their lyrics and storyline, including the discussion of themes and emotions like self-harm, loneliness, and friendship, is the reason so many idols have cried watching their performances. Whoever is writing these lyrics is brilliant. Actually, I'm not gonna lie, I think most of the lyrics are written by Hitman Bang, but I do indeed believe that Hitman Bang is a genius, even if he's not a nice person. We can argue about the ethics of K-pop groups discussing topics like these, and in fact I will talk about that in a few sections' time. But at the end of the day, this spoke to a lot of people and made a lot of people TXT fans. It also makes sense for the group, who are themselves youths in a changing world and who are changing themselves. Okay, with that said, I've talked about Nap of a Star for about 8 pages, so it's finally time to move on from this wonderfully detailed and well-considered music video to, well, this is the end of the album, so now that we've covered all of the songs and the bulk of the promotional content for the album, let's regroup to look at the album as a whole. In this section, I'll consider the other aspects of TXT's promotion of this album, including looking at some details of their performances, considering the ethics of a K-pop group being themed around concepts this dark, the inspirations for the storyline, the things TXT have said about it themselves during this era, and the overarching album structure and storyline. So, let's start with the performances. Now, I won't be discussing most award show performances here, even though they did explore the storyline from this album more. I'll discuss those performances when I discuss the Dream Chapter Magic, since that was the era during which most of these performances were, well, performed. In this section, I'll only discuss other performance-related things, mainly VCRs that were shown before some performances of some of their songs, and the MGMA performance, that being the major performance that happened pre-Magic. I won't discuss music show styling or stage design, because honestly, well, if I did, we'd be here forever, and I'm sure you can already figure out most of that based on what I've already discussed in this video. So let's start with their debut celebration show, which starts with a little introduction video showing the members by themselves, them being given horns by a visualized line of Morse code, and gathering together, where the animation gives them horns, tails, crowns, and wings. Basically a similar idea to Crown. The animation makes them different things, which seems to be the theme of this VCR, that young people and especially this group can become anything. For instance, Yeonjin becomes a heartthrob romance prince, and Kai gains the ability to dye a goldfish a different colour? Okay, sure. The 5 boys are also compared to the star, with the quote, "We can be a star." This is pretty storyline accurate. They come together for the star to work. Then we have the concept of connection with walkie-talkies and lots of fun boy-like things, with of course star animations. Now that's it for the start of the showcase, and the next storyline VCR we get is before Crown is performed. This segment is animated as if it was in a flipbook, with fun paper effects and flipping pages to get to the next part of the story. It's also in a somewhat horrifying way that jump-scared me, narrated in English with an American accent. Ugh. Anyway, this VCR just tells the story of Crown. A boy wakes up and, looking in the mirror, notices he has horns. He imagines people coming to gossip and gawk and to tell him he's a monster, which is represented in true sketchy fashion as a dark scribble covering his body, aka his dark thoughts growing. The boy questions himself and runs away into the night, trying to hide his horns. The animation here is very well used to express his doubts, with a huge gaping mouth representing the monster he might become chasing him. Then a light appears, and so does Kai, who tells Yeonjin his horns are beautiful, and the two smile together. They recognize each other, presumably from when they lived on Magic Island together, and as the narration says, they're not alone anymore. The narrator teases that the story of the boys will continue, and we get this nice transition of the animation fading into Yeonjun's real body, which is fun. Gosh, I love Crown. Also, look at this shot of Subin from the start of the performance. Oh, he's living his best life. Watching this performance also made me wonder what was going on in TXT's heads when they were introduced to their concept. Like, they have to sing these mega depressing lyrics, but you can tell they've been told to smile to the ends of the world, which, I don't know, I feel like it would give me emotional whiplash, even though I understand the reasons why. Alright, moving on, we have this performance of Cat&Dog on M Countdown. It begins with the same sketchy animation we saw for Crown, as the boy raises his head and realizes, symbolized by being surrounded by darkness, he's lonely. However, a sprout grows in front of him which brings colour to the world, and he turns into a cat who becomes Kai. Nice. And of course, animals and nature. Now finally, the MGMA performance. This one was sadly and awkwardly missing Yeonjun, the main character, so was impacted by that, but that doesn't mean it isn't interesting. The performance is called We're Dreaming, We're Growing, which instantly expresses the concept of the story and has a girl reading a book, also fitting considering TXT's book motif. Trees grow in the forest and each of the members has an individual performance behind this screen with a projected forest and stars. TXT like their projectors, of course. Interestingly, as part of these solo dances, each of the members gestures to the part of their body where their curses or pains originate. Subin's ear, Kai's heart, Yu's back, and Taehyun's eye. Presumably Yeonjun would gesture to either his neck or his head. The narration tells us that the 5 boys aren't lonely anymore because they're together, like magic, and asks if we want to hear more of their stories. Again, the storybook concept. And then they perform Crown, duh. And that's it for the star promotions. Like I said, most of TXT's most exciting performances came in Magic era. So let's consider the implications of this. I mean, is it okay for an idol group to discuss a topic like this? So the entire time I've been talking in this video, you may well have been wondering, if TXT are a manufactured idol group with a whole production team behind them who are just trying to make a group that sells well, and in the case of TXT, break into the Western market, can they really truly sensitively discuss such heavy topics as mental health and self-harm? Is it even ethical for a company like Hype to produce a music video like Nap of a Star when they themselves contribute to a trainee system which has been rumoured to lead to trainees killing themselves? Isn't this hypocritical, especially to make a bunch of young boys and men the face of this concept? For a short but annoying answer, it depends. Make no mistake, TXT are manufactured, and the vast majority of the concepts they explore and lyrics they sing weren't made or directed by them in any way, and although they may resonate with these topics, they weren't the ones who chose them. This is the nature of the music industry, and is in fact the nature of many entertainment industries even beyond K-pop. There are very few performance artists that work on projects with literally no external help, and there are no artists that aren't mega indie that do all of the work themselves. Popular artists of any level have huge production teams behind them who decide what they can and can't do, at least to some extent. So if we argue that TXT's storyline and discussion of mental health is inorganic, which you could well argue, this is a statement that needs to be made about probably every artist you listen to. Let me clarify. Whether or not you believe TXT's concept being about mental health is ethical or not, the fact of the matter is that I almost never see these inorganic accusations made towards artists in the West. This argument of ethics is more than valid when it's being directed at K-pop groups, but the issue is that I've pretty much never seen it directed at K-pop groups to actually and genuinely critique the abuse of artists and staff in the industry. Instead, it's used as a way to discredit the industry, genre, and fans, in opposition to other musical genres and industries, and that's a bad reason to bring up this argument. But you probably gathered by now that I do like K-pop and I have no intention of trying to discredit it. So let's discuss this from a hopefully more well-rounded fan perspective. If TXT didn't make their own storyline, is this discussion of mental health genuine, or is it a money grab? I mean, this makes me ask, why can't it be both? At the end of the day, HYBE is a corporation, and the corporation's goal is to make money. But as we see constantly and in many fields outside of music, including film, literature, and more, the goals of making art and making money may be in conflict with each other, but they aren't mutually exclusive, and many of the most beloved and best-selling art pieces are those which speak to people on some level. Let me put it like this. TXT's team's goal is to make as much money as possible through creating a unique and emotionally resonant art piece, and many of the members of that team, especially the creative members, would be considered artists, and no doubt put some part of their own emotions and experiences into creating their art piece. So while it is hypocritical for HYBE, a company which no doubt treats its artists and staff terribly and perpetuates many harmful industry practices, to promote a group with such a raw and human concept as mental health and self-harm, that doesn't mean that the work of the actual artists behind the piece, the directors, producers, artistic directors, and the members themselves should be invalidated. Yes, the corporation is always there, and the corporation has final say and can't be separated from the message of the group. But there are people who have had creative passions within the company and who are using the boundaries the company sets to make the best art pieces they can. Now, yes, it is very shady, for lack of a better word, for a company to make these 5 members the face of such a concept and to use that concept to draw in fans and manipulate money out of people who just want a story to relate to. And it is unethical for them to overwork the members and subject them to the horrors of the industry in the name of promoting a message about mental health, considering they're probably destroying their mental health. But this is an age-old concern of almost any artist that has ever created anything that resonates with people. This is starting to get very, can we separate the art from the artist, isn't it? Except in this case, it's, can we separate the art and artist from the company that funds them and decides their every action like a puppet master? And my response to this situation is pretty similar to my response to the whole separate the art from the artist debate. It's up to you to decide whether you think something is unethical enough for you to stop consuming it, and it's up to you to create and stick to your own values. I personally think we can achieve a certain degree of separation between art and artist. They will never be fully separated from the work, but the work itself may be taken over, adapted, and remixed by fans until it grows into something different. So, applying this to TXT, enjoy their storyline and appreciate the artistic effort that went into it, but don't forget that they, and especially their storyline, are to at least some extent run by Big Hit and HYBE, and those companies will decide where the money goes, which is probably why we no longer see 20-minute storyline music videos. In short, consume critically, but try not to let that stop you from enjoying things. Okay, with that interestingly philosophical section out of the way, let's take a look at the inspirations for TXT's storyline in Star. K-pop groups are well known for adapting and being inspired by previous media. I mean, this is something that happens in every industry, but K-pop has made an art out of it, whether you consider that ironic or not in light of the last section of this video. K-pop groups usually, don't forget we're talking about TXT here, have little time to work with storyline-wise. Music videos are typically only as long as the song they're for, and with songs growing shorter and shorter with every comeback, the time in which to tell a story also gets shorter and shorter. This means that K-pop companies and directors, especially it seems Songwon-mo, have become absolute masters at taking inspiration from other iconic works, and using that as a visual shorthand to basically create shortcuts in storytelling, and thus to make the storytelling more efficient. To use another example from the person who is now my favourite director, Songwon-mo, let's quickly talk about ATEEZ's Bouncy. Bouncy is a masterclass in visual shortcuts to tell a quick story, and is the example I always use when explaining this concept to others. The very first shot of the music video is a massive dusty orange street. It's clearly modern. There's electrical lighting and the buildings themselves are modern, but the massive cyberpunk flamethrowers tacked to the top of the center building along with the bar sign indicate a wilder, more Mad Max type of story. The follow-up shot shows Mingy walking through a saloon door, and these two shots, which take a combined 4 seconds, tell us everything we need to know about this music video. It's in a 4:3 ratio, okay, so old-fashioned. Everything is dusty and yellow, we have Mad Max flamethrowers and the saloon door. Okay, this is a Wild West kind of environment, and we know from seeing X number of Wild West films that as soon as someone enters that bar, there will be a gunfight and there will be chaos and destruction. And also that the setting in general is full of anarchy and chaos. These two short shots have already given us so much information about the music video, simply by using the visual shortcut of Wild West and Mad Max to tug on links in the audience's mind. Links to films which link to themes in those films. Chaos, anarchy, destruction, and gunfights. Oh, brilliant. Bouncy does this several other times, referencing Akira, boxing and heist movies, and Zorro to mention a few. And that's exactly how Song Won-mo and the team of Bouncy told such a fleshed out and compelling story in just 4 minutes. TXT do this as well. For instance, I mentioned in Nap of a Star that the plasticky nature of the set made it look like a child's playground or diorama, and thus instantly evokes the idea of a fantastical and youthful story or fairy tale. They also use the visual shortcuts of the silent film aesthetic and A Trip to the Moon to create a fantastical story. So let's talk about inspirations in this album. This list does also include inspirations which were pointed out to me via section 4 of this video. Obviously, we can't know for certain if all of these things were inspirations, and it's entirely probable that not all of them were, but they're still interesting to mention. Well, first, we have A Trip to the Moon and other silent films, of course. These largely inspired the aesthetic of Nap of a Star, the fantastical world of Magic Island, the pseudo-low frame rate, the telescopes, the celestial images, and may also have inspired things like Yeonjun's flight into the forest, surrounded by strange and potentially dangerous creatures. There's also the use of Morse code throughout the album and promotions. I talked about this earlier, but it's a fun and unique motif. Talking about less specific motifs, TXT clearly took a lot of inspiration from religious iconography, from fairy tales and folk tales, from astronomy, and from the idea of witches and witchcraft. This gets arguably more consolidated in Magic, where it's given a Harry Potter theme. Next, some fans have mentioned Coraline and the Corpse Bride, which include alternate worlds. There's also Kafka's The Metamorphosis, a story about a man who transforms into a monster, aka a giant cockroach, overnight. There's also The Matrix and Dreams vs. Reality and Alice in Wonderland. Those are most of the inspirations in the album, although I'm sure many have been lost in translation. For instance, there does seem to be a lack of Korean inspirations in many of these K-pop storylines, and I don't know how much of that is there actually not being any Korean inspirations and instead Western inspirations being used to draw in Western fans, versus Western fans just not noticing references to Korean culture. I can pretty much guarantee you that no matter how hard we try, there will always be at least something we miss, which is why it's useful to see what a group themselves say. Now, for this section, I was going to take a look at what the members themselves have said about the music videos. Watching what a group says about a music video, specifically when they're reacting to it, can be very useful. Hongjoong is well known for dropping hints about the ATEEZ lore during music video reactions, and music video reaction videos are how I found out that Kepler were even supposed to have a storyline to begin with. The only problem is, well, not only do TXT not have a reaction video for Nap of a Star, they also don't have English subtitles on their Crown music video reaction, which does make it hard to know if they actually said anything useful. But combing through, it doesn't seem like they said anything useful, other than being suitably impressed with the animation, so hopefully I didn't miss anything here. I did find this interview in which Taehyun mentions that the album is about growing up from childhood to youth and coming together, but sorry buddy, we all could have told you that. It's possible they've said more in other interviews, but respectfully, I don't feel the desire to comb through literally every behind the scenes piece of footage or interview for the chance that something could maybe come up. Alright, moving on. Let's talk about the order of the songs on the album in terms of storyline. It should be no surprise to hear that album order is important, in any album of course, but especially so in storyline heavy albums. So let's consider it here. Actually, Star is probably a pretty bad example of a storyline album song order. For a far better one, look at ATEEZ's Treasure episode 3. But Star still has things to recommend it. We start with Blue Orangaeade, which introduces many of the basic concepts and motifs the group will explore. Duality and opposites attract, fate, dreams, and so on. It's bright and upbeat, which leads nicely into the rest of the album. Next we have Crown, the title track, which of course defines the album sonically, thematically, and in terms of physical design. Crown is the hardcore introduction to the story, lyrically, and pretty much describes the story of the album. Simple as that. It also does a great job of introducing us in more depth to TXT's themes of youth and mental health, and of introducing us to the darker aspects of duality they explore. The hide all of your emotions so they can't hear your real pain and see you being vulnerable side. Next, Our Summer, which is a nice bright break from Crown, which is still in line with youth and other key themes. It's the feel-good song of the album. Next, Cat&Dog, which is the kind of goofy song of the album. TXT seem to like having at least one goofy song per album. But as goofy as it is, Cat&Dog still contributes to the album as a whole, highlighting the important characteristics of pets which TXT aim to emulate, for instance loyalty, and also contributing to TXT's ties to nature and animals in the storyline. Finally, we finish off with Nap of a Star, which is the mandatory ballad of the album, even though it's kind of less of a ballad and more of a lullaby. But either way, it nicely rounds out the story from Crown, contributing more to it thematically via lyrics and contributing everything to it via the music video. It finalises the story of the album while also hinting at potential future albums, and thematically rounds out the other songs. The 5 video accompaniments, the lyric video for Blue Orangaeade, the selfie video for Our Summer, and the music videos for Cat&Dog, Crown, and Nap of a Star, also nicely complement the album and show off the various sides of this new group. Youthful, boyish, casual, curious, goofy, and also tortured? With hidden and mysterious depths, I should maybe say. The music video story combination of Crown and Nap of a Star is brilliant, and whoever thought of making Crown bright and playful and Nap of a Star, well, Nap of a Star is genius, since it adds even more to the themes of the album. Crown is, well, Crown, the happy smiling mask the members wear, while Nap of a Star is One Day a Horn Grew on My Head, the darker version of Crown, the true feelings of self-hatred which are hidden under the happy facade. It's such a shame TXT wouldn't be able to mention Persona without being accused of copying BTS, because this is exactly what a persona is. Anyway, point is, even when Star is far from the best thematic album in order, it's still stellar, pun intended, and I think that says something about how good it is. So we've talked a lot about my own observations of the album, relatively devoid of outside input since I don't actually consume pretty much any theory content. But as I will mention again, no one can decipher a whole album by themselves, so let's round out this video by taking a look at other people's theories and thoughts on the album. This is the place where I do, well, what my Tumblr blogs were originally intended to do, believe it or not. My original intention was to put together and consolidate a storyline for the groups I followed based on both various fan theories and on evidence from the groups themselves, because we're stronger and smarter together, something that is, hilariously enough, pretty close to the explanation of TXT's name. So how was Star received? Well, I already talked to you about the statistical metrics of the album, sales and such. It was commercially successful and was also well received in general. Lots of people liked it and resonated with it. As we would expect from the duo of Crown and Nap of a Star, they also quickly obtained a thriving theory fanbase, as do most groups with an interesting concept. So let's talk about some fan theories and tidbits I found for this album. I did my best to stick to theories from the time, since, well, we're looking at this album and trying to stay as much as possible out of other albums. I also won't repeat details from previous videos or from my own analysis earlier in this video. First, we have more Morse code. The CD for the album includes, you guessed it, Morse code, which apparently translates to find the answers, change tomorrow. Fitting. This person also pointed out a few interesting things in the music video, including Kai's 7 Tails being a potential reference to BTS, but that's not super relevant for the storyline. There's also this comment under an old Nap of a Star reaction video which claims that the lamp flickering in Yeonjun's room after his horns grow spells out "help me." Do you reckon TXT's team were a bit obsessed with Morse code during Star? I mean, it was a good obsession, but still. Next we have this video by Musical Stee, which recaps the story of Crown/Nap of a Star and also interestingly points out how the questioning film indicates the location of each of the boys' curses, which is interesting and I'd never noticed it before. They also pointed out some interesting cases of these body parts being referenced at other times, which is insane dedication to dig up stuff like this. This includes references in photocard album inclusions, which gives us a hint towards each of the members' characters through both written words and Morse code. I'll summarize. Yeonjun's code is promise, the promise of the dream they will make together. Subin's code is tomorrow, his is about tomorrow being better together. Bomgyu's is hope, the importance of not giving up hope that things will change. Taehyun's is clue, that there must be a way to find a clue that someone else is also like them. And Kai's is secret, which is, a bit sinister, especially with his line being, "That was my secret, even I didn't know." Considering he's been portrayed as kind of being a dual demon and angel at the same time, this is worrying to say the least. This person also labels the monster heads in Nap of a Star with the boys' names. Yeonjun orange, Subin blue, Taehyun yellow, Kai green, and Gyu red. I guess this makes sense, but I still think it's a bit contrived. Mind you, this seems to be a commonly accepted interpretation, so maybe I'm blind. It's not mega important anyway, so I don't feel too bad. They also claim that Taehyun's mismatched eyes reference heterochromia being seen as a sign of being able to see heaven and earth at once, or being closer to some gods. And I'm not sure where they got this information from, but the mention of heterochromia being connected with witchcraft is something I've definitely heard before. Even if that wasn't a real thing in the past, it has definitely become a real thing now. Remember visual shortcuts? Next we have a video by X Celeste, which points out how the clocks in Yeonjun's room read with his birthday, and who also points out the symbolism of the different animals in the forest representing change and transformation. The theme of the group and album? Next, a video by Sinta Speaks, who draws connections between Nap of a Star and Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis, a story about a man who wakes up one day transformed into an insect, leading to, interpersonal and life struggles. Sinta also draws comparisons to Coraline and the Corpse Bride I mentioned earlier, which both include alternate worlds, and comparisons to Snow White, Cinderella, and The Little Mermaid, which she links to aspects of Yeonjun's flight through the woods. Some of these I feel are potentially reaching, but the fairy tale concept is definitely there. Finally, Sinta mentions the star shining over the boys and the star shining over Jesus' birth, especially drawing in Kai's angel wings. I have no clue if this was intended or not, so I'll leave it to your own interpretation. I mean, Jesus does have a thorn crown and Yeonjun has a horn crown surrounded by thorns, so I guess I can see it. I also love how Sinta describes the scene where Yeonjun tries to rip off his horn, saying that the camera doesn't shy away from the graphic nature and pain of the scene, which is definitely true and which I think expresses very well in a few words what I said in significantly more. Whoops, but also I like to think it was worth it. As you can imagine, this being their debut, and when they were arguably the least popular, it has far less theory posts than their more recent albums. However, it did birth an icon in the Moaverse. The Dream Chapter Star was the album that began the theory career of Laina Sunflower. Yes, she does get her own section. If nothing else because, as fits her current image, Laina put out a lot of theory content for Star, at least compared to other creators. I'll also mention that although I've followed Laina for a while, I haven't actually ever watched any of her theory videos, or at least not for many years, so I don't think my thoughts have been influenced by her videos pretty much at all. Laina's first video about this album mentions how she thinks it must be separate from the BTS universe, since the BTS universe is called the BU and the TXT universe is called the TU. She also points out how the flower concept photos have the TU logo on them, these being the photos that Musical XT pointed out as referencing the body parts relevant to each curse. Then Laina talks about a theory on Twitter which was about the colours the members were wearing. This seemed to inform a later theory video she made about colour universes. Basically, the theory states that there are 3 universes, red, yellow and orange, which is a mix of the 2 previous. For instance, Gyu is from the orange universe and Kai started in the yellow one and moved to the red one. This leads to a really interesting theory that eclipses are the time during which we can travel between universes, and that Kai is unstable and is travelling between them, which could cause danger. And this theory is fascinating. It's mostly defunct, and I don't think it ever really came to fruition. Perhaps it's an example of confirmation bias in theories. But Laina does point out interesting connections between the members' introduction films and does correctly predict that Yeonjun and Kai made a promise to be together. The other interesting thing is that she talks about Kai being dangerous and going between universes, which does turn out to be true if we look at later content like Eternally, so I hope she felt proud about being suspicious about Kai. Laina then analyses the flowers and animals in the questioning films, as in Taehyun being pictured with narcissus flowers, and mentions some countdowns on the website, which teased the debut with some phrases that don't actually seem to have huge amounts of relevance to the storyline as opposed to the concept. Finally, Laina predicts the group will debut on February 19th, since that was a supermoon. A nice idea, actually. The next video is about how the fan cafe has been called the TXT universe, and thus questions whether we are part of it. I don't think so. But in better notes for the storyline, she talks about stars being important, and predicts 5 chapters total, of different shapes. Obviously the shapes didn't happen, but considering at time of writing we only have 4 chapters, Dream, Chaos, Name, and Star, I guess something fun could happen with the 5th or 6th? Next, Laina talks about the possibility that the chapter includes 3 albums, one positive, one negative, and one with balance, like BTS's Love Yourself. I wouldn't say that happened, but sure, interesting. In her Crown reaction video, she shares my frustration that the boys aren't an animal consistently throughout the video, but instead switch. And yeah, switching symbols and colours is an annoying part of TXT's story for me. They are never consistent and don't even seem to have any meaning, and it makes it so much harder to interpret. Like, Chasing That Feeling establishes very salient colours for each member, and Deja Vu just kinda chucks that all out. She also complains about how Crown isn't branded as part of the TU, which leads to questions about what's even going on here. Laina then released a reaction video for Nap of a Star where she again predicted 5 albums, one for each member/shape, and also cursedly looks up Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. Gosh, I seriously hope that didn't inspire Nap of a Star. She also aptly doesn't trust Kai and points out that he has a secret even he didn't know he has. He thinks he's an angel, but he actually isn't. She also talks about the cat representing death, which, yeah, that's definitely an easy conclusion to come to considering how it's represented in the album. Laina released her first TXT Universe summary in June 2019, which basically just recaps everything she's talked about so far, and reiterates the 5-album theory. She also talks about her theory that when Yeonjun's throat is cut by the cat, that is when he receives his gift, and when the other boys hear him and come to him. You know, I don't think it's correct, but I like that theory. She also talks about the birthdays and constellations being important, the cat having heterochromia and the cat having galaxy eyes. Laina also talks about the TXT Find the Answers website, which is a website that was updated for the Dream chapter for each of the albums, and which tells a story through stars and constellations about how the boys used to look up at the sky and communicate with other creatures, but don't tend to do it anymore. This ties back into the constellations, which Laina also points out are in the Crown music video a lot, and which may show that TXT are in an alternate version of the BTS universe. It's also fascinating to see the development of these theories that has happened over time. For instance, in this video, Laina discusses in depth the idea that Yeonjun is the protagonist of Star, which is now something we pretty much think is obvious and take for granted. She also talks about Alice in Wonderland theories and books in the music videos which just seem to be random props. Then she spends some time on the 5-album theory versus the 3-album theory, reinforcing the idea that she is convinced there will be 5 since Star is so heavily tied to Yeonjun that it just doesn't make sense otherwise. Laina then released 5 videos, one each talking about the questioning films for each member, where she went into extreme depth analysing each of the plants and animals in the film to try and characterise the members in the storyline. For instance, Subin being a protective and compassionate character. These could well have relevance to later content, but I don't think TXT have pretty much ever been characterised as directly and concretely as Laina describes here. It's been far more abstract. Maybe I'll be proven wrong in a later installation of this series, but for now, I think it's about as simple as something else Laina pointed out, Subin being around mantises, bats and deer, all of which have good hearing, like he does. During this time, Laina also released a video about TXT's MGMA performance, which I mentioned earlier. As part of this, she does talk about this cute design for what the next album could be. Going off her theory that each album is for a member with a different shape, the next album would have been about Subin and the flower shape. Hence, the predicted next album is the growing chapter flower, which is a cute idea but obviously quite different from what we got. Most of the stuff Laina talks about isn't super exciting for our current knowledge. For instance, she talks about the number 6 and how the flowers have 6 petals, but this didn't become important. She does talk about how the trees growing are like Yeonjun's horns and how the cat shows up, with eyes that flash red when Taehyun is dancing. She compares Taehyun to the cat as they both have heterochromia. She also points out how thorns grow across the screen at one point, obviously related to Yeonjun trying to rip out his horn. She also talks about how constellations and other drawings appear in the background during Crown, which could have relevance to the storyline, but I don't think ever became super important. Now that I watch this video, I realise how little I noticed detail-wise in this performance, but at the same time, I guess I still got the actual message of the performance, so I feel okay with that. Laina also released a video speculating about the next album, which was prompted by a leaked picture of TXT filming the Runaway music video. She basically talks about how this convinces her that Subin's album is next, since he was in a school in his introduction film, how he was the second person to dance in the MGMA performance, how the performance included flowers which were the shape associated with him, and so on. She talks about the idea that each member will write their own album or chapter in the scrapbook the group showcased in their debut showcase in America, All of these ideas are really cute, and it's a shame that it was pretty much all wrong. There's tons of fun details in these videos, some of which are relevant and some of which aren't, but if I talked about them all, I'd be here forever. All in all, Laina released 13 videos about TXT theories in the Star era, which basically gave us a nice idea of how she consolidated her views on the story, from when the members were first introduced to when all of the content for the album had been revealed. Obviously, a lot of these theories have become outdated, but I have my own reasons for believing that, which I'll mention in the next segment. So with that said, let's finish up this video. Tomorrow by Together, or TXT, debuted on March 4th, 2019, aka 9 3/4 Day, with the Dream Chapter Star. Star via Subin was the album that got me interested in K-pop to begin with, and although I won't lie to you and say it was the concept that made me interested, instead it was Subin and only Subin, the concept was a bonus, and is one of the reasons it's stayed in my top albums list and is one of my favourite K-pop albums of all time. And I don't think that's going to be changing anytime soon. Hence, I feel it deserves to be on my list of both best albums and best debuts. In this video, I've taken a relatively in-depth look at the album itself, and each of the songs on the album, and have used this analysis to hopefully demonstrate to you why I think this album is brilliant and perfectly set TXT up for their later career, and thus why it is a massive shame how criminally underappreciated it is. It's been borderline forgotten by the fandom, the group, and the wider K-pop community, and I think that should change. In this video, I've also taken a look at other things related to the album, such as performances TXT have done, how they've promoted the album themselves, and the various pieces of media this album could well have taken inspiration from. I've also talked about how the order of the album aids the storyline, and have considered the questionable nature of a K-pop group run by a massive and sleazy corporation talking about youth mental health, such an important and heavy topic. But regardless of your specific opinions on that, TXT and their storyline have a lot to recommend them. After this, I talked about the fans' reception of the album at the time and the various theories that ran around online, including talking at some length about the origins of Laina Sunflower and her original TXT theories, which have been insightful and interesting. Now, you may have found this video confusing and big-brained, and you may have found Laina's videos confusing and big-brained, and honestly, I'm in the same boat as you. There's always at least something we'll miss in a music video and feel silly about once it's pointed out to us, and I have watched theory videos before and thought, wow, that's so well considered and thought out. I wish I had the brains to see all of that. And I know this happens to lots of people because I've seen many a comment left, both under my own content and other people's content, making self-deprecating comments about how stupid the commenter must be in comparison to the creator, since they didn't see any of the theories in the video. And these comments make me sad and annoyed because we really shouldn't feel stupid about these things, for a few reasons. First, we all have our own levels of investment in the storylines of these groups, and we all thus have our own things we're interested in and our own things we notice. As I've said before, no one person will notice everything about the story and be able to figure it out entirely without help. Even Laina had help from both commenters and other theorists on Twitter. But second, even if we try super hard, we will not notice everything. Because as is the nature of art, everyone will interpret it differently, and see different meanings in different places. For instance, Sinta from Sinta Speaks drew connections between the star in Nap of a Star and the nativity scene, but I'm not Christian and that didn't occur to me at all, even with my knowledge of religious iconography. The other problem here is the exact same problem that led to so many of Laina's predictions, especially the one of 5 albums for 5 members, being incorrect. Fans will always put more thought and care into the storyline than a company does, no matter how well done that storyline is. TXT had, at debut, one of the most condensed and well-considered storylines of a K-pop group, and they still had inconsistencies that led fans in circles. For instance, they introduced the members with specific colours of clothing and with specific animals and flowers. This naturally led Laina and other theorists to think there was a message being sent, since these actions were systematic from Big Hit. This is the birth of the multiple universe theory, but Big Hit never cared enough to take it anywhere, and we can assume from this that it never really meant anything to begin with. Similarly, as Laina repeatedly points out, the members are introduced in a specific order with specific shapes, and Yeonjun, who was introduced first with a star shape, was also the protagonist of the Dream Chapter star. Even if we take into account the massive amount of confirmation bias which runs through many a K-pop storyline theory on the internet, it makes more than enough sense to think that if all of the members are being introduced in this order with these shapes, and the first member relates to the first album, surely the next album will be the next member and the next shape, right? Because this is the kind of systematic marketing which suggests a story to fans who are already primed to expect a storyline from a group. This insane inconsistency is something that plagues almost every storyline group. For instance, ATEEZ seemingly established certain visual elements for certain universes, then blended those universes willy-nilly. ENHYPEN established certain powers and then switched powers? TXT's team are probably the worst for this. Colours have been mixed up, associated animals have been mixed up, and more. It's irritating as a fan and is one of the very few issues that still plagued TXT's early storyline, regardless of how good it was otherwise. It's also one of the reasons I avoid making predictions about storylines and also avoid extrapolating past a certain album. You've seen in this video that I've very rarely mentioned other albums and have focused almost entirely on content exclusively from Star. And this is because I know the story will change as Big Hit/Hybe sees fit, regardless of the brilliant and creative interpretations that fans came up with. This is also one of the reasons TXT's storyline angers me so much. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, it was pretty freaking fantastic at debut. Sure, there were inconsistencies, but it was still incredibly solid. But as they went on through the years, the storyline basically got dropped by their management and was only hinted at vaguely, but the fans are still being led on and are still looking for overarching story where there no longer is one. This is an issue, as I mentioned, many other groups have, and it makes me so sad, because they all start out so good and then they just inevitably devolve into a conceptless mess, or probably the better option, into single album stories. Honestly, TXT have had it better than most in this regard. They've still nicely held onto their concept of youth and mental health, and each minisode seems to resuscitate their storyline for half a second until it collapses into dust again, like some, I don't know, zombie being kept alive against its own will or something. But the story's still there, occasionally. I mean, they had a Morse code track in Minisode 3. Am I in denial? Maybe. Partially to prove this point that we can never notice 100% of the storyline by ourselves, and can never notice every detail, and to hopefully make both you and I feel better, in this video I purposefully did the vast majority of my analysis before watching any theory videos, and I didn't correct any mistakes I'd made when I watched theory videos in part 4. I also avoided making predictions outside of the album, even though I could have mentioned tons of implications from other albums. In this way, you can see directly how both I and other creators have missed certain details of TXT's content and storyline, and thus how, actually, we all have the same sized brains. Remember, we're stronger together, but will still no doubt be plagued by Hybe's questionable storyline decision making no matter how solid our theories are. Look, regardless of what TXT are up to now, and whether you think it's good or bad, or even whether you think it's better or worse than their previous content, one thing is for sure: the Dream Chapter, and especially Star, deserve more appreciation. And I hope I've proven that to you in this probably 3+ hour video. I'll 100% make videos on the other TXT albums at some point, but honestly these videos heavy on analysis can be time consuming and exhausting, and I want to take a moment to look at other things in the meantime, so there's no predicted timeline for when. But if you did like this one, please let me know in the comments, because the knowledge that people are interested always motivates me to work faster. And that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.